Welcome, everybody, to the Women's Speed Chess Championship qualifier. Cannot wait for this one to take off here. It is an official FIDE Women's Speed Chess Championship qualifier event here on chess.com, and the action is already off. We have players beginning their games. I see here we have Andy Jack with the white pieces taking on Elegance Ricks, and we see that we have a Sicilian structure with a close Sicilian. Knight c3, bishop e3, queen on d2. Trying to go bishop h6 to trade off these pieces. So when I look at this position for black, I'm trying to figure out, do I play for f5? Am I going to just castle kingside? Now that bishop h6 is coming, taking on h6. So instead of trying to castle kingside, quickly going in for the attack. Last two moves are a little interesting to me. You can castle queenside first, and then at some point try to go queen g7 to kick the rook, but instead just dropping back because the threat on c2 was pretty strong. So in comes the knight to d5. So already we have a player with 1 out of 1. That must have been a full point buy because the rounds have just started. It is a 5-minute plus 1 second increment time control. So I would be surprised if a win already happens. It must have been a buy, but I'll check that in a bit. So let's keep looking to see who some of our top competitors are. We have just one e4 on the board in this game, and Alex Chess, WIM from Georgia, internet not online right now. That's a problem. You're gonna have to get back in there to compete for this one. And here with the white pieces, we see lovely setup for the minors for white. Black has a knight on a6, and it's Benoni that's typical. You have this pawn on d6, the main thing to worry about. Watch out for an eventual rook takes e3, maybe right here. Rook takes e3, pawn takes e3, queen to e7, piling up on the pawn that lands on e3. A very thematic sacrifice to take over the dark squares. You have a bishop on g7 on the long diagonal. You may want to go for this. All right, and white's king castles. So I think that we're not going to see the capture here, but that is something to keep an eye on. Let's keep on going. Here we have Grandmaster and Antonetta Stefanova here with the white pieces. We have another Benoni structure. Look at this pawn on d6. Look at this bishop on e7. Not the happiest piece in the world. Rook to e8, pawn g6, bishop f8. That probably will be played because otherwise this bishop on e7 is just taking up space. The rook on f8 has no life. You can also move this knight out, and there it's played, so that the bishop can come to f6 on the long diagonal, and this knight will likely drop into e5. But if I play h3 here, is the knight really going to come to e5? Because after h3, knight e5, chop, chop, f4, things like this, giving me the big pawn center here, where I already have a pawn on d5, blunting this bishop on b7. Starting to look very pleasant for white, though it does carry some inherent risk with some of the dark square holes. So after knight g4, we're sitting and thinking here, and knight to d2 by Stefanova. So she can bring her knight to c4, thematic, going after b6, d6, eventually bishop to f4, and there's going to be a lot of pressure here. Not to mention this knight on g4 is already under attack. It's actually easy to blunder that piece. My first instinct was bishop f6, but the knight on g4 is left undefended here, and that would be a big disaster. So let's keep on. Okay, knight e5, so now f4. The good thing about not trading a knight on e5 is that black has less space, and the side with less space wants to trade pieces. So here, by keeping both of these knights on the board, look at this queen. The queen can't get to d7. The pieces are stepping on each other's toes, and that's why that was a really nice decision to play knight to d2 and over to c4. I'm just going to keep an eye on all these games here, see what's going on. We have so many strong players here. Ooh, I see Valentina Gunina, 1989, in a standard. It almost looks like a Spanish, but I see that it came from a Pirtz defense. And what's good about this for white is you have two strong pawns in the center. Black is a little less active, and watch out now for knight f5. That's why knight f8 was played. You had to open up this bishop to the square because otherwise, an f4, full steam ahead is Gunina here. But if she had played some random move, rook to b8, in comes knight f5, takes, and then queen takes h6. This is a big problem for black. So knight f8 played, f4, and you see that there's over 3 minutes per side here. And that's the good thing about this time. It's 5 minute plus a 1 second increment. It means that start with 5 minutes. Every single move you gain a second on the clock. So if you get into severe time trouble, you start making a couple pre-moves, and then your clock goes up. So queen on e7, the evaluation bar going more and more into white's favor here. It makes sense. White has a huge initiative. Black's king is about to be in danger, and black hasn't finished development. The one piece that's annoying me is this bishop on c2. It's not out in the open, but eventually it can be. I would consider taking with the f4 pawn on e5, because after f e5, d e5, I want to play rook f2, rook f1, and then start going after the f file. That is a semi-open file, but my knight on h4 also may be vulnerable at a given moment because of this discovery on the knight. So f takes, I expect d takes, and d5. That's right. So you don't want to open up the center entirely, I guess. She plays d5. This bishop doesn't have a clear diagonal to work with. These pawns are strong. But do watch out for this knight. And there's knight h7. So now the knight is actually directly under attack. Going to have to bring this back to f3. You can play queen f2, which both hits f7 and protects the knight on h4. And that's a really nice move. It's protecting the knight because if queen takes, knight f5 check. That's a check to your king and a check to your queen. Well, that's a double check to your queen. So when you take my knight, there goes your queen. So let's keep on going here. I'm going to check back on the initial game we looked at. We see that this queen went to g5. This, oh gosh, this f6 square. This stemmed from a close Sicilian, and now the position isn't open, and that's doing black no favors because these rooks are stepping on each other's toes. Knight comes into f6. The king is caught in the corner here. Black's pieces can't really move. I'm expecting an eventual g4 to open up the h file and go after this black king. And this is going to be an upset, 22-81 against 26-34 here. That could spell trouble. And ooh, f6, hitting this queen. That actually is a big turnaround. So g4 was too soon. Look at the evaluation bar swing in black's favor on a single move there. Instead of putting a piece on f6, making sure black has no activity, g4, f6, and now the evaluation is in black's favor. You can go knight h4. This bishop's under attack. That fianchetto bishop is important to the safety of the white king. And this pawn is now under attack thanks to the pawn and bishop. One inaccurate move and the tables have turned. So we'll see if Andy Jack is able to hold this one off. But it's looking really, really good for black here. And let us keep going back to some of our top games here. This really is going well for black all of a sudden. The position is opening up. This bishop has some life here, staring at this pawn on g4. It feels like black is going to just win some material. And the open h file isn't dangerous because it's not like a white rook can land on h1 to pin this knight or anything. This queen can go into g5. It's the one thing you have to be concerned about. But queen g5 is going to be met by knight f3 check, forcing off this important bishop. You can just take it right now, and then we'll go bishop f3. Bishop f3 to start with. Excellent move. Can't take because knight takes, forks the queen, forks the king, and where else are you going to go? This queen's about to enter the game via f6, hitting the knight. Maybe we'll just get this queen slithering up the board into a square like g4. Looks very problematic. This rook can come into f4 as well, over to g4. Strong, strong attack here. And the Stefanova game is looking like it's about to be over because the knight came to f5. White isn't even down a piece. White's actually up a pawn. And I'm not sure how this happened, but in comes knight h6, and that's a problem. If you go king f8, I have queen h7, queen h8 with checkmate. Black's pieces, all of them stepping on each other's toes. That's why resignation occurred. These pieces are entombing this king. You go king f8, in comes queen h7, queen h8 mate next. And if no other move, here comes knight h6 check, hitting the king, hitting the rook. That's game over. We see that Gunina has won her game, her first round game. Just a crushing position now up in exchange. We liked your position earlier. Over here, what is happening in this one? So Vaishali, the higher rated player between the two, but black's position is starting to look really nice with rook g8 to come. This knight on d4 is already under attack twice, only defended by one knight. So rook takes d4, knight takes d4, queen takes d4. But I guess what white is hoping for is in this trade, there's c6, and all of a sudden the black king has to be careful because this is opening up. There's a rook on c2. Yes, you can play a move like knight to b6 and then try to put more pieces in front of your king. But that's a scary thing to do when you have under 40 seconds on the clock. And here for black, I guess you have a minute. You are a little bit ahead. Knight to b8, a calm move. Trying to play knight c6 and cover the square. The d4 knight is still under threat. You have many pieces. The knight can't move, very importantly. Knight to b3 is met by queen takes f3. And once queen f3 happens, here comes the checkmate. Looks very, very good here for black. So, still plenty of games in action right now. Plenty of them here. And b4, try to go for the attack. I think you can just take this knight now. You can also think about rook here, but then white goes g3, and some of the attacking chances go away because this structure with all the pawns protecting g3, it's going to be hard to crack. So I would probably just go for the material right now. And let's see. There's a rook endgame I see in this game here where even material, but that doesn't mean that the position is even. Because look at black's rook staring down at f2. White is hitting e6. And now if we take on f2, we have to calculate the king and pawn endgame. And we see it. Trading everything on f2 here. Rook takes f2. King takes e6 at the end. King e3. King e5. It seems like you have the opposition. And the only way for white to get after this d5 pawn is to play h4. Give up the flank pawn for the center pawn. We will see a draw in this game unless something crazy happens, because black will capture, then bring the king over. Here, d4. You don't want to cede control of the center. You don't want to bring your king back and allow king to d4, even though that still will likely hold most of the time. Just, I think d4 going up was the easiest. But okay, king e6, still exact same plan. If you ever play h4, I don't even need to take your pawn. I can sit my king in the corner, because an h pawn and a king versus another king, it's always going to be a draw with the black king in front of the pawn. So we'll move on from here. This one will be a split point, and we're actually seeing that happen. So let's go back to that Vaishali game, because where did black's queen go? Where did black's queen go? This was a great game, and trading on c6, I guess, was misguided. You see the evaluation bar shoot up for white, because after these trades, queen a3 protects this knight, because this pawn on g2 is pinned, and then it's just bringing all the pieces into the attack over here, and instead of black having the attack, it was white with a4 hitting the queen, distracting the queen from the rook, and Vaishali gets the win, because either you save the rook or you give up this queen here, and, well, that's it. So we have a couple games still ongoing here. And, whoa, this one's interesting. It's an endgame where white is up in exchange, but black is just trying to be a nuisance with the knight. And the reason it's interesting is because of the time trouble. Mutual time trouble. Anything can happen with a knight. Knights are really annoying pieces. And if you take this knight, if you say rook takes knight and trade into a pawn game with an extra one for white, this is way better technique by Mungzil Turmung here, because she gobbled up all the pawns. But sometimes when you're ahead, you want to liquidate, you want to trade pieces, but that's where things can go wrong. Up just one pawn and a king of pawn game could have been a tough sell. So here, winning for white. Good conversion there. And still so many games left. This is completely winning for black. Now it's an extra bishop with the pawns. There we see it. Resignation. More games to go. Whoa. Okay, so this pawn wants to promote. Knight and bishop versus king is winning. So if this rook has to sacrifice for the pawn, that means black will win this game. At least black should win this game. Now this is a bad transition, because the king protects the pawn. And even if you kept this light square bishop, it'd be winning. The only way with an extra minor piece this wouldn't be a win is if there's a dark square bishop. And the reason why, don't bring the knight there. Bring the knight back here. Bring it to f2 with check. Kick this king out the corner. Play h2. Play h1. There it is. That's a quality win there. And we have a position where it's an extra rook. So this is the last game of the round. We'll see how this one concludes, but it should just be an easy win for black here. The king is already cut off. There's no risk of stalemate. So rook a6 checkmate now. Oh. Okay, delaying it by one move. Rook a6 was mate. White loses on time. So you see the list of players up there, 1 out of 1. The top 8 players after 9 rounds, they make it into the knockout. And there will be 2-game mini matches. Going to be a lot of fun, because the top 2 players from that will make it on to the Grand Prix stage. And all right, we have Tanya Sachdev here with the black pieces. So we have a 26-38 taking on a 23-89. I think Tanya is a little bit underrated in terms of online play. She did play in the I Am Not GM Speed Chess Championship, and she suffered a first-round defeat, but she got her practice in. So this is standard theory thus far. B3 played, so you can feed and kettle this bishop to B2. And so this pawn can come to D4. White may refrain from playing D4. I think now D4 makes perfect sense, especially against D6. Black is a little bit tame. You're not fighting for the center as you would with a move like D5, but it does keep the bishop open on B7. So knight out. This pawn eventually is going to go to d4, probably now. And you can also play it slowly, queen e2, rook to d1, maybe rook to c1, and eventually play d4, so the timing is as opportune as you possibly can consider it. Because when this capture happens, it's not that big a deal, but if there are sometimes these lines where you play d5 and you come after this pawn, and then you're forcing white into a different type of pawn structure. And, alright, so let's keep on going. We have a Sicilian here. This one should be sharp. Black had to capture earlier on f6. I'll just show you exactly when that happened, because there's only one move ago. Bishop takes f6. If you took with the bishop on f6, down goes your pawn on d6 here. So you take back with the pawn. And after king b1, you note that the king for black is going to have a hard time castling kingside. Because as soon as you castle kingside, I'm ready to start attacking you. And the knight came back to e2, is under attack. Where else could it go? You didn't want to bring your knight to a4, but here comes black's position. Pawn a5. b4 is protected, but more importantly, I have access to a4. And once I go a4, maybe I'll go a3. Maybe I'll go b3. Black has some options here. The king in the center is actually quite safe, thanks to this pawn structure here. Not easy to make inroads. You'll have to play move like f5, in which case I can respond with e5. If you play e5, I have many pieces hitting that square. So knight d4 I think is a good start, and in particular this knight, because if the other knight had gone into d4, that would open up the bishop and look better, but then black would have an a4 with a tempo, with the knight being on b3. So f5 here is played, trying to chisel the pawn structure. e5 is possible, and the thing you have to worry about with e5 is then if white can get to the d5 square. It doesn't seem so easy just yet, but still, it is a permanent concession in the center. So e5 played. These pawns now cemented in place thanks to this pawn f5, so eventually this queen can start coming into the king side with queen h6, queen g7. Of course, you take care of your knight first. And do you trade? That allows the bishop to come after the e4 pawn. Then you can bring your knight to g3. And it's just a very interesting battle. A good dynamic here where black has these pawns. Not the end of the world, honestly. And it's the queen is staring down here. Black really wants to punch through d5, but white's next move is going to be bishop c4. So I would consider queen c5 there. It's played. This is actually thematic in a position like this. It helps you play for d5, and very importantly, takes away this bishop c4 move, so that I can play rook to d8, play pawn to d5, and try to open up the center. You have bishops. Bishops need open space, especially this one on e7. So b3 is probably a good move, but the risk of playing this is when I play a4, I now have a pawn to capture. My rook can open up into the action here. It's looking a bit scary. So we'll come back to this game. This one has been very fun. Let's keep on going down the list. We have Grandmaster Stefanova here again with well, good time management, and the position is a bit cramped for black because of this pawn on c5. You have this pawn chain here where now on e4, ooh, overlooking this tactic, because e4 you're kicking the knight, but the knight came to f5 to get to e3, and now you lose an exchange. Right now, take on f1 back. White still has much more space and a knight on e5 that looks good, but the extra material with an opening a file is going to be a problem. If everything could stay closed, maybe if white could play b5, b6, something like that, but the problem is the center opens up as well. If you're going to fend off rooks with your minor piece, you want the position to be quite close, because rooks are not better than minor pieces if they don't have open lines to work with. And so here the lines are opening up. This rook is tied down to the f7 pawn for now, and you want to play f6, but f6 allows knight to g6. So I would probably just try to play rook a7, rook a8, go over here. Queen c7 is a good move as well. That way you can play f6, there's no more fork, and you can play queen to a5 to try to trade queens and go after the a3 pawn. Rook a7 is a good starting move. This one looks like Stefanova is going to win this one. So let's keep on going here. We have Mary Arabidze with the black pieces. What is happening here? So it is a position where I can't even do a material count. It's actually even material. I honestly thought at first black was up a pawn, then I thought white was up a pawn. This pawn on d4 is under some pressure, but this pawn on f4 is under attack immediately. This pawn on c4 is annoying for white because you have this structure here. And if we focus on the queen side, this pawn on a4 stops white from playing b3. So if black can pile up on the c4 pawn, I think that would be a good thing. Bishop takes d4. So if, oh, that's a nice tactic. Bishop d1, bishop c5, hitting your rook. And I have this pawn under attack. I have ideas with bishop to d5 stopping here with check, and then this bishop also under attack on d1. That's actually just a really smart move. It's a temporary sacrifice of this rook on d1, understanding that you are going to get more in return. Because after rook, bishop d1, bishop c5, the only thing you can do to save your rook and your bishop is to attack the bishop. But rook f5 is met with bishop d5 check, cutting off your rook from my bishop. I take yours next. And if you go the other way to c8, then I take on b7, hitting both your rooks at once. So if you take my bishop on c5, I take your rook, and now white is up a couple pawns. It will be a tough endgame to win, but white will have extra material. So Arabidze thinking here, going to spend some time. It is a tough position now that bishop took on d4. You can play rook to d8, but still there's bishop to d5 check always. You can think about taking on b7 first in a lot of these variations because that will attack the rook on a8, but landing the bishop on d5 is very important. So let's keep on going down here. Let's keep on going. Ooh, not a fun position to tune into for the white side of things because this knight is under attack many times here and it's pinned to the queen. And black's up a pawn. So it seems like things have gone wrong, unfortunately, for elegant 285 here because c4 is always an option. If I don't want to have my pawn be under threat, I'll play c4. This knight can help on the knight on e4 that's pinned, but if you play knight f6, that's the one thing you don't want to do. Because if you play knight f6, I take, and that's a check to your king. Not to mention that there's a problem with your queen, but you're getting back rank checkmated. Everything would be bad about that. So c4 played. That way, if there's ever knight f6, I can take with my queen, and my knight, importantly, has blockade on the last rank. So there's no back rank checkmate. My knight can return and save my king. So still looking good for black, but there are tactics here that you have to be alert for with knight f6 check ideas. So if you move this knight, say, to c5, a natural looking move to pile up pressure on this knight on e4, then comes knight f6 check. That would be really, really bad, especially because this queen is in line with this bishop. It means you can lose your queen as well. So knight c5, check. If I take with the queen, told you, queen takes here, it's going to be a back rank checkmate. If I take with the pawn, that would be good because it's no longer checkmate. But after the king comes up, bishop takes queen. Now, all of a sudden, white's up 2 rooks for a minor piece. So, tough moment here after bishop b1. Trying to think. Ifan just confirmed. Let's go. Strong field indeed. g6 played. The king can now get off the back rank. Tends to be risky to play g6. The dark squares, vulnerable. And, well, you don't have enough pieces in the attack. You would need a bishop on c3 to make it look scary, or a queen over there. But anytime your queen moves out the way, this knight on e4 is hanging. So the rook lifted. We'll come back to this one. We'll see how this one continues. But we still have, I mean, this game here between two players is going for each other's kings. This pawn on h5 is now under attack. This king is in the center. But is this king really that much better on b1? Once bishop takes b3 happens, aren't I swinging a queen over to a5 and going for checkmate? All right, this is a tough, tough, tough position. I actually think that these are the type of positions where the engine likes white, but there's like one white move to keep the advantage. And I imagine queen h8 check, because of king to d7, then you lose the rook behind it. So queen h8 forces bishop to f8, and then knight takes h5, trying to get knight takes f6. But if you're focusing solely on the king side, you're looking down over here at the queen side, because if I give black even a free move, let's say I take, and I take this way, rook takes a2 scares me, because now the c2 square. Like, things like this are super dangerous. So if you waste a single turn here from white's perspective, your king gets just checkmated immediately. So queen h8, bishop f8, she brings the queen back to d2. I think that's a sensible decision, but you'll note that the evaluation bar just dropped, but black only has 20 seconds left. So bishop takes b3, you're going to take with the c-pawn. Now your queen is in good location to protect here. But strategically, if I can save this pawn on e4 and bring my knight quickly to a square like e3, bring this knight to f1, into e3, into d5, black is in big trouble. But for now, the knight can't move because the pawn e4 is lost. This rook can actually swing away from the attack into the king side because the pressure on the g file will be hard to deal with. So queen c2, we see an open file. Watch out for queen c7 check. Is bishop d8 the move? But bishop d8 stops the black rook from coming. 6 seconds, 5 seconds. Okay, queen to b7. That's probably a very good move because still, she wants to get her rook over to g8. And now she has all 3 squares under control. Knight takes h5. Good move to play in your opponent's time control. You can take on e4. She instead plays rook c8. We can trade off pieces on c8. Trade everything. Bring the knight back to g3. Once the knight gets back to g3, the pawn e4 is protected, and here comes an outside pass pawn. Bring this king. Oh, that was too early. I think that was too soon because you allowed bishop to f4. But bishop f4 doesn't play bishop f4. Okay, so this king. Do I just think I just take this one. I think I get away with just taking here. Yeah, this is an unfortunate position to play in time trouble because with under 5 seconds remaining, you're trying to fend this off, but you make moves. I mean, still rook d2 going after this pawn. This knight's trying to come to e4, but this king will take on d5, and I'm keeping that square under my control. So rook d2 check. Is this going to be a draw? No, king e1, but rook takes g2, rook takes a2, knight e4 check, take on f6, go knight g4. That hits the bishop and protects your king because it keeps the bishop out of e3. So now this king cannot enter the third rank. This is going to be a win for white. I think h6, rook takes g2, then h7. And here comes the king. It's escaping out here to f3. Open. There's e4 check ideas. So you have to be very careful not to allow time to e4, but the bishop needs that pawn's defense. So knight f6. All right. Take this pawn e4, and now you just march the pawns up. Just go g4, g5. Knight g5 is probably the easiest. That's a good move. Take on f7. You win the game. Whew, this one was well handled in the end, but still chances because in time trouble, I can imagine this rook being traded off and losing this pawn here, but knight g6, bring the knight back. Okay, this one should be a victory. I always speak a second too soon here because now this pawn is going to be lost. I actually can't go away from this game. King takes b3. Play king a3. This is what happens in blitz chess. b3. Oh gosh, this is getting harder and harder. Rook c3. Keep that knight away. 1 second for white. But you got to move with 1.6 seconds. This is a pure... Take the pawn. Take this pawn. You have the fork on d1 at the end. Rook takes b2. If she sees it, she wins. Wrong move order. Rook... Okay, check. And now you... Oh... Oh my gosh. That was a mutual time scramble. And black actually wins the game. I couldn't leave it. And the point was here, rook takes b2, king takes b2, knight d1 check. I check you. I take your rook. My g-pawn runs. But instead, in mutual time trouble, wasn't found. It's too hard to play here. Rook c4 check. Probably was pre-moving something with taking on b2. The king's in check. You have to move it. But with no time on the clock, with just over a second left, she flagged. It's unfortunate, but it happens in blitz chess. We have just one game left between Mindhunter and Lelia. They made a draw. So we have 0 games left in the round. You can pre-move, but sometimes pre-moves really hurt you because you pre-move, say, with your knight, but then your king gets in check. So then it's like, oh, that piece can't move. What do I do now? And things go wrong. And we have liftoff in round 3. So we have plenty of players at 2 out of 2. You can see the standings next to the board over there. And reminder, the top 8 players move on to the knockout. Top 8 players. So let's keep an eye on this game here. We have an extra pawn for black, but this pawn on c4 will be captured back. This is standard opening theory. Black tries to kind of collapse white's center as quickly as possible, but these lines do run quite deep. Very dangerous for both. You know, you can play e5. Think about this. This knight is pinned, but does it actually work? Can't black play h6, or can black just start going queen a5? You think about all these things in a position like this. Taking on d4 can just take back with the knight, can take back with the queen, trying to trade queens off. But imagine you take back with the queen. It looks really strong for white, but then you recognize that your knight is still pinned, so knight takes e4 actually just drops a pawn. But it looks good at first glance to get into the endgame. Then you recognize that pieces are hanging. Bishop takes f6. This is still theory. Queen takes c3 check. King to f1. Wait, queen takes c4 with a check on your king, and then you win this piece here. But there's rook c1. I know it's hard to envision, but all of this is opening theory. Neither side doing anything unique just yet. We'll come back to this one. I think that with the pieces getting traded, it may not be the tactical slugfest we want to see, but it's still a standard opening theory. But I do like black's position now. Something changed here. I think you were supposed to take on f6 earlier. And now the difference is you don't get to ruin black's pawn structure. So you take on f6 here, and that way black has to take back with a pawn. Because now after takes, knight takes, if you take here, I just take back with my knight, and now you have a problem on e4, you have a problem on c3. So this is an issue in these openings. You make one slight inaccuracy, one move order difference, and now you have handed the advantage to your opponent because these split pawns are not happy. This pawn on e4 is directly under attack. You can actually take on c3 with check right away. The king will have to move, and then you take this bishop, but you can just take this bishop first. The choice is yours. The position will still be better for black. So let's keep on going down the list. What? Oh, I was like, wait, why is there a piece just hanging here? It's because there was a knight capture on c5. So knight takes e4. Look at this tactic. This knight on d4 is left unguarded. So knight takes e4, bishop takes, and after this trade, this pawn on b7 is under attack. That pawn on h6 was captured, but this is a really good bishop on d4, protected by a double pawn, but it's less about the double pawns here. It's just about the quality of the piece. Good move, queen f6. If you play bishop g5, I have bishop takes f2 check, I think is a tactic. Oh, wait. I thought the queen was here. I blundered. Not my pieces. Oops. But I was thinking that you can distract the queen away. If the queen were here, bishop g5, I can take on f2. But of course, the bishop can't go to g5. Does any black can play g5 and just trap this bishop? Yeah. g5 here. That bishop is trapped. There it is. And that's going to be a big problem. A really big problem here. Because that's just a trap piece. I really thought the queen was on d2. And now that it's not there, I think we know that it's a problem. A big problem indeed. So, yeah, let's move on from this game. Now that black is up a piece, this bishop on d4 is still strong, pinning this pawn here. So queen takes g3. Be on the lookout for that. This is going to be a black's game here. So let's keep on going. We still have Gunina here. Ooh, wow. Sharp position indeed. Black is currently up a pawn, but f takes g5 threatens to rip open the position. F g5, e5, bishop takes e5. Let's go for it. Because after f takes g5, you can't just take back. This knight on f6 is under attack. And if I go here, you're trying to kick my queen off. I can play queen f2, but then you have knight e4, but I can just take this. Your king will have a check at the end, and now I'm going to win back this knight. So that's a problem. So f takes e. This is all happening. e5 played, and bishop takes e5, continues to rip open black's position. The king is still stuck in the center. This knight's still hanging on f6. So bishop takes e5 is a tactic that should net more material for Valentina Gunina. And all right, so this is just how many extra pawns? 1, 2, there's 7 pawns on 4, 3 extra pawns. I think she's got this. So let's keep on going. Go back to this game. Okay, still up a piece for black. Looks like a victory in the making. Okay, this position, we saw it earlier. It looked not great for white. It still doesn't look great for white, if I'm being honest. And as you see the engine just dipping down. Here it comes, -2.5 almost. Extra pawn, king stuck on f1. This isn't good. Even this pawn e5 is overextended. So the one thing you have to be careful on in a position like this is not just like liquidating, trading, and saying, oh, I'm up a pawn, so I trade all my pieces. You actually want to take advantage of the fact that this king is still not going to be safe, even against the g2. That's not a safe king. It's not a fianchetto square without a bishop in front of it. And if you trade, say, both pairs of rooks, but leave queen and knight versus queen and knight, that one extra pawn will be hard to start pushing and promoting with so little material. So I would actually try to play a move like knight to b4 and go after this a2 pawn. That's another weakness. I would try to team up on it, especially because I have queen d5 check possibilities in the future thanks to this king being on g2. So knight b4 or knight to c3. Maybe knight c3 is stronger because you hit the queen and you hit the pawn and you open up the d5 square for your queen. So I think that this is going to be a victory for black unless, well, something really changes here. Okay, keep on going down here. Whoa, very closed type of position at first glance, but then I count the material. White is up a pawn. Didn't notice that at first, but white is a pawn ahead. And h5 is a possibility. Maybe play bishop f3 first, just to avoid any sort of bishop g4 business. But bishop g4, I can play bishop f3. Then I bring this rook to g1. This king is going to be open. That's not a happy king. You have the king sandwich between the two rooks. You probably want to start running your king this way, but white is still up a pawn. So even if you get your king over there, it's actually not going to be safe because I can play b5 at some moment to break open that side of the board. The king on f2 is great. It's very safe, and it's because I have an extra pawn here, and black's bishop on g7 isn't very good. So play bishop f3, trade off some pieces, and go for it. And why not? Rook here to g1. I'm trying to figure out what black should try to accomplish here. Because this pawn h4 is one that can be under threat in the future, but for now it seems like the attack is so quick that it's not like black is going to be in time to pile up pressure here. And queen to g4 to add more to this attack on g6. I can play rook to g5. But that's the thing, is you trade too much. Like, let's say rook g5 takes, rook here, queen h1. Now my queen comes to f5, and I don't really see how white is going to play for an advantage, because you're only up one pawn. It's a very closed position, and your king now actually comes under fire. So queen g4, king f7. This is good, keeping more pieces on the board. I like this position for white, for sure. So let's keep on checking out some of these games here. We have Chelsea Monica, popular streamer, and with the white pieces here, what the material count is even. Hard to count double pawns sometimes, but this actually is very solid for white. And this pawn on c7 is, and this bishop on d6, it's very good construction in the sense that they protect each other, but this bishop on d6 would probably rather be on b6 for some activity. This rook on a2 can't go anywhere, the knight and the pawn stopping any of its movement. So without being able to do anything in particular, it doesn't feel like black has great winning chances. That said, if white overpresses and does something kind of drastic, then there can be problems. But just pushing all the pawns makes sense. Watch out for g5. If we start trading here too much, my king comes to g4. The king's going the wrong direction. And by playing... Oh, no. Oh, no. That's allowing this king right in. That's just going to be... You're walking this king and you're up 2 minutes on the clock. Yeah, this is just going to be a win. Definite win here. Open up the light squares. You have a dark square bishop. You're losing f6. So the king's trying to come to a4. But even when your king gets to a4, I can just go knight c1. I think knight c1 is just a very good move. And b3 is the one opportunity, probably. But there's rook c4 check. Well, actually, yeah. So b3. You have 2 seconds left. She has to play it. Okay, rook c4. Check the king. And then bring the rook back to c3 and take this pawn. So rook c4 check. King to b5. Rook to c3. You win this pawn, and there's no more danger. You're just completely winning. So there's actually a really instructive blitz technique there of spending some time. She's well ahead in the clock. Her opponent has 2 seconds. But if you make a really grave error there, then all of a sudden black goes from dead loss to maybe even winning in certain lines. So I think you could play e5 at the tempo on this bishop. And you can also just take... Oh, this rook was hanging. I forgot the rook was hanging. Alright, but this pawn is really annoying. Can you just take here and play e5? That's what she's going for. Kind of a risky decision. Bishop here. e6. Wait, is she even winning anymore? Like I said, when you have so much extra time, you should probably use it. And, well, unfortunately for black, you see that the evaluation bar just went crazy high. Oh my gosh, that is so smart. That was so smart. I think all of us were so focused on the e-pawn. Instead, h6, h7, I'm going to have to show this after this game concludes. h7, the bishop can't cover both passed pawns, and here's a queen. And just when it seemed like black was getting away with it here, wow, what a concept. Look at this. So I think taking on a2 gave black too much opportunity, and then allowing the capture of this knight, it felt like all of a sudden here, there were chances. And you know what that means? That means the only move was bishop d2. That way you protect your pawn in advance, and then put your bishop on g5. That is, nobody's seeing that with 2 seconds on the clock. So king takes b2, king g6, and then the problem is e7 takes. The black king comes back to c3, where I attack this pawn here, and after d5, I go king d4, and I'm attacking your pawn. So my king gets back in time, and now we're in even material pawn in game. So we get to something like this, where the king eventually goes this way, and my king gets to the corner, and this is just theoretical draw. What a concept. Let's go to a game still in progress. We have an endgame here where black is up 2 pawns, so it's 2 extra pawns for black, and it went on time. Woo. It went on time. Ooh, Goryachkina. So she's playing with the white pieces here. What just happened? Rook to b5. The rook comes back to b1, stops the pawn. King comes to a7. You have to sacrifice this rook here, and then I have 2 extra pawns. So queen, you can take on d2 first. Queen b7. Yeah, that was just hoping that Goretzka has no time. So that's why he's going for it, but I think she has it under control. The pre-moves, game is strong here. Queen, get another queen. You can just pre-move all the way up the board, and you're seeing that happen. And resignation. So Goryachkina wins. I feel like that's never a surprise when you say Goryachkina wins. Hey, she's incredibly strong. Ooh, checkmate. King h7, g6 check. That's a resignation. Boom, boom, king h6, and that is check and mate. So tuned in at the right time for that one, for the end of the game. What is happening here? Wait. Black won on time. What just happened here? Black won on time. And the engine was trying to figure it out really quickly. Of course, it's better for black, but winning on time with just an extra knight, these crazy things happen. So waiting for the next round, we're 3 rounds in. We have just 12 players tied for first now. And we have liftoff for round 4. All right, so bishop d3, playing a calm approach against the French. This is a position you play where you're trying to avoid some of the big theory. And taking on d5, now you can play c3, you can play knight to f3, try to castle, and you're just playing solidly. And eventually, you can give black an isolated pawn here if you take on c5. But if you do so on the first turn, the bishop gets out without having to stop in between, which is very nice for black. It's not the end of the world to have an isolated pawn. You can even take here, now the bishop already developed, and you take back. But black is happy with this because although you have an isolated pawn, and that means a pawn can't protect it, you have rapid development. And I don't love the look of this knight e7 because I'm staring at h7 with an eventual knight g5 and things like that. I think that white is just slightly better thus far. Let's open up some more games here. And we have Divya Deshmukh, taking on Vaishali. So these are 2 youngsters from India, both very talented players. And we see a sort of London system, white will play h4, try to bring the knight to e5, play h5, and play h3. Okay, a calmer approach. You often see players play h4 these days, just trying to go for an attack and bring the knight here, play h5, use this rook, but this is a more solid position. And this knight on c3, it's kind of awkwardly placed. You can play knight to b5 and try to go for the c7 square, just to free up the c4 pawn, because you tend to want to have your pawn in front of your knight, not behind it, where you're putting more pressure in the center. Knight e4 is tempting here, because behind this knight on c3 is a pawn on b2, so opening up the position where your bishop seizes the entire diagonal, that looks pretty good for black. Looks like she's thinking. We'll keep on opening games here. We have Grandmaster Stefan over here, where we have a Caro-Kann that has turned into, it's like a French, but there's a bishop on f5, so it's the best French you can possibly get. And now black is trying to chisel at white's pawn structure. You have this pawn chain here from b2 to e5. So if you can start removing some of the pawns or challenging the center, then it's going to be harder to keep this chain. And white pawn e5 stops a bishop from d6, a knight from f6. It's really good, but it can come under attack at some point with f6, just trying to open up the position for black's pieces. So currently, black is trying to figure out what is my exact plan. Do I take on d4, or does it actually free up the square on c3? It does, but she decides to go for it. Knight takes d4 is possible here, because I'm hitting the knight, I'm hitting the bishop. Instead, pawn takes, and this is the one downside of taking on d4, is you've opened up the knight's forward access here to a square like c3. But still standard. Knight came to e7, bishop g4, bishop g6 to bring the knight to f5, go after the d4 pawn. So that's why bishop g4 is played. This bishop is not actually the most useful piece. The knight on f5 will put pressure on the center. White played b4 to play bishop b2, try to play b5 to kick this knight away, because if I can't keep all this pressure on the d4 square, then white is feeling much more relieved. But here comes queen b6, a third piece in the attack. Next move is bishop takes f3. And what is white going to do about this? because bishop takes f3. Ooh, look at that move, knight d2. Actually, I think that black could have captured a move ago. Take here first, and then queen b6, going after this pawn. That was probably the precise move order. Because in the game, after queen b6, knight d2, bishop e7 was played. You can't take on d4, because I take with my knight, and now our bishops are staring at each other. And if you take my bishop on e2, my knight takes back. And if you take here, I take back with the knight, and now I have all three pieces protecting that pawn on d4. So that's a tricky move order. White actually got away with that. I think that it could have been punished, but now that it hasn't been, White has a good center. White has the two bishops. The two bishops isn't the end of the world just yet for black, but it will be a problem in the long run. So let's keep on going here. We have Gunina with the black pieces here. Queen on d6. So these kind of structures are interesting for blitz game in particular. The queen on d6 blockades this pawn on d5, and this pawn can be captured at the right moment. But anytime you think about capturing d5, you just look down the d file. Maybe there's some possibilities here, which is why the last move was rook a to d8. Bishop d5 would have been a horrendous blunder because rook takes, queen takes, bishop h7 check, opening up an attack on the queen. So that is why black put this rook to d8, so that now Gunina can capture this pawn on d5, and it will be not punished because you have another defender on d8 covering the square. So white should not just be giving up this pawn. She should probably play... Well, there are many ideas here. One idea is like a knight h4, knight f5. She brings the bishop back to b1. She wants to play queen d3 and go for checkmate. But I think I can get away with just taking this pawn here. And as soon as your queen goes up, I have g6. Maybe there's some rook to d1 with... Oh, this is getting kind of complicated. Oh my gosh, it doesn't work. Bishop d5, rook d1, bishop takes, queen takes, rook takes, rook takes. There's knight c4 at the end, and one of your rooks is lost to my knight, and I gain back my material. I have an extra pawn. That's a nasty knight fork at the end of this variation. Oh my gosh, you can get away with it. So take this pawn. I think Gunina will see it. I think she'll see this knight. Wait, knight fork doesn't work now because queen d3 threatens mate and threatens the knight. So you don't want to play it too soon as you actually blunder a piece, but you can take on d5. And I guess in many of these variations, just this knight c4 threat is available to black. So that should be a pawn grab for Gunina. If she wins this, she'll go to 4 out of 4. Yeah, hard to argue with her play, generally speaking, and on the chessboard. So e5 played by white here. Goryachkina with the black pieces. So what's going on? If you take, there is heavy artillery on the d file going after the queen, but then you'll probably lose this pawn on e5 at some point. And that looks promising, but I don't know if I really want to open up these rooks, because if the rooks don't get open, you have this isolated, well, it's not an isolated pawn, it's backward pawn, but if you ever take, then it becomes isolated. But you have this backward pawn that I don't want you to allow you to play d5 with. So queen d5 is also very tempting, and she ends up taking, probably a good move. But I was thinking as well, queen to d5, trade off the queens, then go after that pawn on e5. But this is definitely better. Queen f5, this pawn is now under attack 3 times. This bishop trade is offered. Bishop f4, black has g5, kicking the bishop from f4, winning the pawn on e5. So I think that this Goryachkina is doing quite well here. And let's keep on going. We saw Chelsea Monica win that endgame with the king and pawns against the bishop. Now with the black pieces, looks like there's some threats. Oh! Oh no! Oh no! Queen h2, blundering mate in 2. Ah, that hurts. We tuned in at just... Oh, because the queen on c2 was here protecting the second rank. And as soon as we tune in, queen c1, I understand why you want to offer the queen trade, but I guess she forgot her queen was covering h2. She needed that queen to defend. Maybe bishop c1 was better, something like that if you're trying to attack the queen. Rook to e2 to save the second rank, but unfortunately, a blunder right into checkmate. You hate to see that. And, all right. Here we are, a position now. Rook on c6, that's a good rook. That's a problem for black. This rook on c6 hits this bishop, hits this pawn. Rook takes f3 is in the air because this pawn on g2 is pinned. So now I think you have to play knight e5, good move, hitting the queen. And the bishop can't take the rook because the queen's under attack. You move the queen to some square here, and then I can just play rook to f1. I can also play rook to e2. I couldn't have played rook e2 with the queen on f5, but rook f1 is certainly the safer option, keeping the back rank protected. Now, there's a tactic here. Knight d7 is a threat at some moment, but rook c8, if you take on a6, I have queen takes f2 check. Rook takes f2, rook c1, back rank checkmate. I sacrifice my queen, because when you block, I take, my rooks protect each other. That would be a really nasty tactic. So after rook c8, you lose this bishop on b4, but especially in a kind of bullet scramble, you make a move like rook c8. Actually, you can get away with it, because the bishop on b4, I take your knight e5, so she plays it, and this is an important moment, because you do not want to blunder this back rank checkmate. That would be really sad, especially in a position like this. So what moves come to mind? f4 comes to mind. Maybe not the best move, because you're weakening the e3 square. f4 played. I just said maybe not the best move. There it goes. And if rook c6, knight c6, queen takes d4, you can take with the pawn on d4. Yeah, this is very good for white. Up a pawn. Alright, so I'm still looking for some kind of knight d7 tactic. Doesn't work. Trade queens, because the queens are threatening each other. Maybe now just rook c1. Your rook did its job. It protected f2 for long enough. 20 seconds. I didn't realize that white had such little time here. So queen b6 played, going after the e6 pawn. So I think you should probably take. There's also knight d7 with the fork. Queen f5 played. If rook takes e6, rook c2, or bishop c5. This rook is actually needed on the c file because of counter threats. So 11 seconds. Not much time left here for white. Both players at a perfect 3-0 score. h3, queen e4. Wait, takes. Oh, missed an opportunity. Takes, and queen takes e6. This pawn was hanging with check. And so queen, go back to b6. Let's see if I would go back there and try to repeat moves. But she clearly doesn't have enough time to calculate all the possibilities here. Position is still good. 6 seconds left to 30. Actually, I'm not sure. I think I would rather have... take on d3 and play bishop d2. I was about to say I'd rather have black's position, just not by position, by time. But 5 seconds for white here. Still a firm grip on this one. Because the knight on e5, pawn on f4, this configuration is great. The rook on c6 is strong. Now black under 20 seconds. Going to 15. You have to move. Rook c8. Probably rook back to c1. She puts queen c2. That's probably safer. Keeping the rook towards the king. And queen d3. We've seen this position. Bring that queen to a6 next time instead of c2. Rook c7. Bishop d6 comes to mind as a way to take on e5. Attack on g7. Be careful. Here comes knight g4. Here comes knight g4. So has knight f3. Rook g6 though. Counter threats. Bishop d6 first. Play rook g6. No time for your opponent. 2.3 seconds. Play rook g6. Just go for the checkmate. Rook f2 would be the move. You can't go rook g6 now. There's a knight here. But 2.4 seconds. 2 seconds for black. Knight e7. Knight e7 is a fork. Knight d7 if you see it. She brings her knight back. It's hard to play advancing moves when you feel like your king's under threat. Good decision. Quick queen retreat. Play rook g6. Or play g5. If you're going to play for a win, play g5. Do it now. Knight g4. Rook f3 coming. There it is. Queen h4. White's doing really well in the time pressure here. Queen b6 getting active. Here's the e6 pawn. Take on e6 with check. Bringing this knight back to f2. And white wins on time. That was impressive because white had like 2 seconds to black's 18 seconds. And every single move she played almost instantly and managed to keep her composure and thus win this game. That was a time scramble and a half. So, this is several extra pawns. So the king comes here, the king comes to g1, I go g2, I build a bridge, and then I win this game. Rook c4. Could have played rook h8 there, but king f2, king g3, and then rook blocks your rook's check, and then my pawn promotes. Here it goes, queen, and now you're up a queen. I think she knows how to win this game, up a queen. So let's keep on. There's some other games. Alina Kashinskaya. What's going on here? Alina is white, and that's a win on time. I was going to say, if she's playing, she should be towards the top. She had such an impressive performance in the I Am Not GM Speeches Championship. She wins the game. Her pawn is very fast here. And let's keep on looking. We have several games left. Another extra queen position. I don't think... another extra queen position. That's what happens at the end of the round, right? Most of the games are done, and we saw several games with an extra queen, and the games that are remaining are generally nearing their conclusion. And, you can play it out. You never know if somebody will stalemate you. It's not like we've seen that before, have we? certain PogChamps game. These things happen, and it's happened to me too. So I'm not obviously trying to call out any individual player. These things happen in the heat of the moment with waning seconds on your clock. You just make a quick move, and unfortunately put your queen on the wrong square. We saw Eric Rosen do that to Elizabeth Pates. Is Lizzie playing in this tournament? But these things do happen. All right, we have a GM battle here. We have a Rosalimo with Bishop B5, take on C6. Let's get this Magnus Carlsen, Fabiano Caruana type of World Championship theory. So knight E7. The knight comes to E7, so you reinforce the knight here. So if you play A6 and the bishop takes, you can take back with your knight. So take on D4, and then play A6, bring your knight out to C6, attack the queen that gets here. Lizzie is not playing. Got it. All right, well, bishop on B5 now under attack. You can take on C6, knight takes C6, bishop takes C6, take everything here, but then black will probably take and try to go for D5, or even take here, trade the queens off. You're always worried about giving the two bishops to your opponent. So if you do take on C6 with the bishop, then wouldn't be the best thing for white. Let's go to Gunina versus Chelsea Monica here. Good pawn structure in the center for white. Black at some moment soon can go for F6 to try to collapse the pawn center. Try to take on E5, or if you take me, I take with my queen, and now I have a semi-open file. And in the start of this position, black is the one with the two bishops here. We have a bishop pair. All seems well in the world. But where is this bishop going? Because if my bishop has to go back to B6 with a B4 move, then that bishop kind of gets stuck over there. So she takes on D2. Queen takes really quickly. This rook is going to come to C1, put pressure on the C file. Do I just take on C6? I like the look of bishop takes C6. The one problem with it is if black throws in bishop takes F3. Because what I want to accomplish here is by taking on C6, play rook to C1, go after this pawn, but I don't want to compromise my kingside pawn structure, especially because my king, I don't think, wants to go that way. That seems very risky. So queen F4, you take. I can draw my arrows right. You take here, because the queen will need to stay protecting this D4 pawn, and so it's not like you can protect the knight that way. So it looks like you're going to end up taking on F3 with your pawn, whether you like it or not. You can move your knight out the way, but where's it going to? Knight to G1? That looks like too much. Yeah, I think this is okay for black. So let's keep on looking down the list. Chess Funds is taking on Koryashkina. So G3 was the last move. I was like, why was G3 played? But it's because E4 was about to trap this bishop. So that's why G3 was played. I'm like, that makes a lot of sense now. What just happened? Take on D4, knight takes D4, knight E5, and incoming was knight C4. So bishop E2, but now I can play bishop H3, and you don't have the right to castle, but you'll castle queenside. So that's the good news for white, is you can choose your direction. I think instead of bishop H3, which looks good, it's like the appealing option, just play knight to G4. Go right after this piece. And where's this bishop going? Right? It doesn't really have a good square to go to. So knight E to G4, go after this piece. Seems like you're playing with the initiative here. If you can capture on E3 and ruin white's pawn structure, of course, that's something that black should want to do. So ultimately, I think knight G4 is my choice here, even though bishop H3, for instance, was tempting. What else is tempting? Queen E7, a simple developing move. Looks pretty good. So yeah. We'll come back to this. Goryashkina, she plays bishop B4. Ooh, that's a nice move. Knight E4. This knight on B4 is pinned to the queen. So I really like bishop B4. I was thinking more of going for the kind of direct attack along the E file, but bishop B4 is super strong move. That's pinned. Knight E4 is happening. This bishop is stuck on E2. I don't know how you protect the square. F3 looks so weakening. I don't think you can get away with that. That's a good move. Knight D5, in addition, right? F3 only stops knight D4. It doesn't stop knight D5. Hitting the knight, hitting the bishop. Ooh, tough position. Let's look at this matchup here. Divya Deshmukh with the black pieces. F5, closing the position down. The idea, E4, G4, eventually H4, G5. You close down the center and the queen side, and you go for a king side attack. So I would think about E4 here, a thematic pawn sacrifice, because black doesn't want to sit with no space and have nothing to do. You play this move E4, And after we trade knights on e4, for instance, then I can go rook e8. At least I have something to attack. And my knight can come to c5, my knight can come to e5. The bishop on f6 looks way better than it does when there's, compared to when there's a pawn e5. So I think this is a critical moment, and e4 feels like the move. There is one more idea, I guess. Bishop a6 coming for the c4 pawn. But bishop a6, you can't go b3. That's the entire point. Oh, maybe you can. Bishop a6, b3, e4. I have knight to d4, so I can get away with it. I was worried about this diagonal, the knight and the rook on it, but knight to d4 closes that diagonal. But still, it does feel like black can pick up some momentum here with more space. So either way, you need to play with e4 in mind, whether it's after bishop a6 or before it. Playing e4 feels completely necessary here. But we'll come back to this. And let's look at Alina's game. Oh my gosh, there's a king on d7. White is down just an exchange for what looks like a vicious attack. Bishop e5 hits this rook. If the rook comes to g8, you queen f7 with check, hitting the rook, hitting the pawn. Rook h7 feels like a good way to save the 7th rank. And now queen g6, hitting this pawn. Queen f3, hitting this rook, I like queen f3. Queen f3 is nasty. I'm hitting your rook. You can't protect it. You got to move it. Queen takes d3. This rook, discoveries everywhere. The g6 square. Oh my gosh. Oh wait, there's mate on c6. What am I talking about? I'm missing a mate. I was so focused on these. Oh, it's not mate. The king can go to e7. Okay, good. I'm glad I didn't miss mate in 1. But I was so focused on the discoveries that, and like these crazy tactics and everything, that I didn't even realize the c6 square is under white's control. This king can't move. e7, knight c6 check, forks these pieces. Knight f6 check, forks these pieces. This is a really nice position here for Alina. It's no surprise to me whenever I see her with a good position in the chess game. But this is like as dominating as it gets. All your pieces in the center. Black is actually up material. Black has a rook and a pawn for a knight. So rook and pawn for knight, but the material isn't important when all of white's pieces are congregated in the center and just going for the crush. I don't even see a move here for black. Every move has a problem with it, and here comes rook d1 takes here. Here comes queen g6, not hitting the pawn, but hitting the rook, and also this pawn on d3 still is on my mind. Here it hits this one, a knight f6 check. You can just take this rook. This king can run to c8. Maybe you go knight f6, king here, and even king to b1, so you can go rook c1 and just checkmate this king. Knight f6 check. I think she'll take the rook, though. No reason to get fancy. The rook is just hanging. It's free. Capture it. This knight on d4 covers c2, very importantly. So if king e7, I can take because you don't have any kind of queen c8, queen c2. Take the rook. Seems simplest. Take this pawn. Take everything. And after d2 check, the king can come to d1, and everything is safe and sound. So, see some funny chatters. Thank you everybody for being here, for all of the support for this tournament for the Women's Speed Chess Championship. It's going to be a really fun one. We have 9 rounds of Swiss chess with the 5-minute plus 1 second increment, and then we get to the knockouts. The knockouts will be even more fun. If you didn't think that was possible, well, it is. So speaking of fun, let's go to Chess Funds against Goryachkina, because we haven't been here in a while. And wait, what is happening here? I think that... There we go. Give it a little time to register, and it says black is completely winning. It's... Oh, wait, no. I have queen f8. I can just bring my queen over. Yeah, Goryachkina is cruising. Sometimes the evaluation, right, the computer, it has depth. So it's going deeper and deeper. At first, it may see something and not realize that there's some kind of protection or some kind of tactic. And then it's like, wait a second, what am I doing here? Come on, completely winning for black. So black has a huge advantage, but it's not. The game's not over because queen takes c7, queen takes b7 here. It's just free pawns. You go Pac-Man. You start taking all these things, and the queen is sort of stuck protecting the pawn on f7. Here, I'm looking at bishop f3, eventually going bishop d5, taking this pawn, taking this pawn. So I shouldn't say completely winning. I'm going to take that back. I'm going to walk that statement back here. queen b7 played, and why? Queen b7. Just trying to keep the pieces stuck. If this bishop moves, actually that's very sneaky. If this bishop moves, say to f6, there was bishop takes f7 check because the queen needs to stay protecting here. And actually, after g6, there is going to be bishop takes h6 at the right moment. But now it's not that moment. Now it's the moment. Uh-oh. Down goes that pawn because the queen is under attack. This rook's under attack. So you have to slide this queen over d8. So it's not the end of the world. But that's not a pawn you just wanted to give up, especially towards your king. So bishop c5 played. Queen e1 check. Take on f2. That's going to be a mating attack. And if you play bishop to d2, then I can just start putting my pieces in the open lines here. Rook d8 looks really good to me. Just bring that rook over. Queen e5 also looks very strong because you will play rook d8 eventually. You take away squares from this bishop. The one thing that you have to watch out for is bishop c3, getting the queen. So queen e5 played. So maybe queen d7. She had queen b7. I get it, to keep her queen and bishop protected. I like queen d7. You would have hit the rook and then given yourself the d5 square for your bishop. And, well, Goryachkina wins. Goryachkina wins. What's happening here? All right, white wins here, up a piece. And now all the games are ending. So Alina Kashiska, she won her game. We were looking at that earlier. We have several players now at 5 out of 5. We have Vaishali here in this end game. Who's better and why? It says zeros. Even number of pawns. This looks so scary to me. But I guess after c2, you have to go rook c7. Oh my gosh, e7 check? Oh, 1.5 seconds. 1.5. Wait. Here, check. King here. Over here. She won on time. She won on time. She gave the check. And the king has to go here. Only move that would not just survive and keep the game going, but actually keep it even. And that was so tricky. But right here, there was a moment where I think e7 check was winning. After king up here, you have rook to d8. And I let you queen. I queen with check, so I get to attack you first. But this was a crazy game. Giving these checks ended up taking away black's remaining time. There were 5.4 seconds left. Wasn't enough. Wasn't quite enough. Checks are really annoying, especially if you pre-move something. Or you're holding your mouse, waiting for rook takes d6. So you're like, wait, if the rook moves, I take on d6. Or I have to go queen here to distract the rook, something like that. And then you're like, oh, shoot, I'm in check. Now I got to move my king. That's why pre-moves can backfire. So, okay, let's go to the games that are still remaining here. We have Zhenya versus a draw by repetition. This is actually a pretty amusing draw. Just these checks. But, wait, could the king, after check here, could the king come up? Like, if the king comes up, I guess you have b7 now, or rook to d8. And the point is you're going to threaten to promote and threaten to checkmate at the same time. So that's... Playing for a win can be playing for a loss. All right, let's go to extra queen. End of the round. We often see this. This is... Oh, king h2. Watch out, no more checks. I'm sorry, no more king moves. So if you give the check, it's mate. What I'm trying to say is the king has nowhere to go, so just be careful. It's actually very easy to make a move like king g4 or king b5. I have the board reversed in my head. But king b5, you make that move and you're like, oh, it's going to be checkmate next. Oh, shoot. I've definitely done that before plenty of times. Happens in bullet chess especially. So after 5 rounds, we have 3 players in first place at 5 out of 5. And we're going to, well, maybe see Goryachkina versus Gunina. All right. So let's see here. We're about to have liftoff from round 5. And just waiting for the game. Maybe the players get a little break here. So let's look at the standings a bit. So we have 3 players with 5 out of 5. We have then 5 players with 4.5 out of 5. And a bunch of players there with 4 out of 5. Whoa, so many players there with 4 out of 5. Up until 24th place has 4 out of 5. So it's a pretty intense competition there. And Yeah, I see in the chat, completely silent except for the clocks being pressed. That is how uh, the classical chess tournaments work. Because anytime somebody talks, it's distracting. It's very distracting. So we have confirmation. There is a little bit of break. So it's a break for the players. And, well, with the players are going to take a break, that means I'm also going to take a break. But when we return, we will have the final 4 rounds of the Swiss portion of this Women's Speed Chess Championship qualifier. And then after that, we'll have the knockouts. So stay tuned, everybody. I'll be back in a few moments. Just going to grab some water, stretch my legs. But when we return, I'll be even more excited. I don't know if it's possible usually, but more excited for the remaining chess. So we will be back shortly. And we are back and we have games. So let's look at the game between Goryachkina and Harika Dronavali here. We have a position now. Sorry to tune in a second late here, but we have a position where White has this knight on d4, this bishop on c8. So what do you notice? That it's a knight versus a bishop, and the bishop's on the light square. So if this knight can, say, get to a square like f6, that's the dream. Not going to happen, but it's the dream. Trying to get to a dark square to take advantage of some of the holes on the black king side and no dark square bishop. So that's something to look out for. The bishop came to c6 precisely for that purpose. The knight comes to d5, I'm snapping the thing off immediately. So this is going to be more of a long-term struggle. Unless you play f4 and go for an attack, it feels like there's a bind in the position. You have this really nice pawn structure against this light square bishop, but the knight still can't move forward just yet. There are times where you play knight d1, knight e3, because from e3, if you think about the knight on e3, it can go d5 or g4. And that can be very annoying to deal with, especially with a queen c3 and the open dark squares on the king side. And, all right, queen f6. So, this is a good play by black. I mean, very good play. This is a good move. If you take, I take with my a pawn. You will have a problem on a5. But, she does capture. I didn't like that decision. That decision feels like it plays right into White's favor. Rook a3, rook a1. This pawn is done. Wait, there might be a trick. Rook a7, rook a1, b3. Oh, sorry, rook a, b3. Takes. Queen takes a1. Rook takes a1. Rook a1. King f2. Rook a2 at the end. Haha. There it goes. But this king and pawn in the game may still be good for White. But I just wanted to point out that tactic that I saw. So queen e5 was the choice instead by Harika Dronavali. So queen on e5. It's good here. Are you trying to play f5 though? I mean, what's the exact? I think you just swing that rook over and go for this pawn. f5 I can just trade. It's not the end of the world for me. I do want to capture this one. Interesting. So this is, there it is. Goryachkina looking to go 6 out of 6, and you do have to watch out because if both these rooks leave, then this last rank is in trouble. So I would take here, and after queen takes a5, then play b3, because now there's unlike that other position where there were some captures. A1, queen d5. So take that thing because you're gonna take with the e pawn, and then rook to e2. At least you have some activity here. Black's not out of the woods. Black's much worse, but putting the rook on e2 is at least something to be happy about in a position that is been looking quite bad. So you're attacking b2. Goryachkina goes for this because she's going to bring her rook to a7 and attack this pawn on c7. I think I would play this move, rook to e8. And the reason why is if I trade rooks, then I know exactly what White is doing. Rook a7, rook takes c7, and then b6, b7. In fact, this already might just be winning. Because you can't, normally you do this, you take this pawn, but no, it's losing. If you take, I have b6, you go back, I go b7, I have rook c8 check, and then I push my pawn. I think this is just completely winning at this point. Bring your king in this way. I mean, there's really nothing black can do here. Same idea. King f1 or king e2 didn't matter. King f1 or king f2, excuse me, didn't matter. The king is coming here, and now the king can just run this way. So everything is open. This is going to be a win for Goryachkina. She is going to go at a 6 out of 6, and that makes her the front runner in this one. But remember, it goes to the knockout. So even if she ends up at first, maybe it means she gets a favorable pairing relative to some of the others, but there's still plenty left to play for. So now I would play rook to d7. I would take this pawn because my king protects the pawn that's been under attack. My king, if you start checking me, my king comes up to f5. Seems pretty straightforward. And I just want to go back in time just a little bit, just to show exactly what I was talking about. If you take b6, rook here, b7, I get this check, and then I promote next move. So that's why Harika couldn't take this pawn on c4, and, well, even not taking it has done nothing to help her, because the position is just lost for black. So now this pawn is hanging. It's going to be a second extra pawn. Let's move on. Let's go to Gunina versus Vaishali. If she doesn't win this endgame, something has gone horrendously wrong. Whoa. Okay, what in the world is happening in this one? So white is up. Nope, white's not up a pawn. Even material. So the material is even somehow. And two bishops versus two knights. The knights are doing well here because they're taking away squares from the rooks. This square, this square, this square, all can't go to those. So this rook on a8 can swing to e8, but other than that, it feels kind of useless. So rook d6. Watch out for sacrifices on g6. If I can break this king open, I'm very happy. So bishop f7 is a nice defensive move. Knight takes f5. This rook on d6 hits this bishop through the pawn. So I think you can go knight takes f5 here. I think Gunina can play that. I mean, of course, queen c3 check is tempting, but then this bishop comes to g7 and fights it off. So I think knight takes f5. Just steal this pawn here. This rook on d6, this queen on h3, both staring at this bishop here. So knight takes f5. There it is. She played it. Nice find there by Gunina. She's obviously a fantastic player, and she won the London Chess Classic Rapid Play event. I don't remember the official name for it, a bunch of years ago, where she went 9 out of 10 against 8 Grandmasters. She was just crushing everybody in that event. So now she takes on h6. Probably with the rook. You want to get an attack going. But if you take with the rook, you may be afraid of bishop g6. Again, the rook sort of trapped over here. But you always have knight e5 if you need it. And there's knight e5. King g7. Just try to get closer, but you're afraid of all of this stuff here. King g7 might be the only move. But king g7, knight takes g6, pawn takes g6, rook h7. Oh, now you just take. Just take this. And then rook h7, rook h8, and thank you for your rook. Just couldn't ask for a better game. Just really nice tactical vision. Queen takes pawn. You go checkmate this king very quickly. Take this pawn. I'm sorry. Shoot. I spoke to you. Check and then take this pawn. Oh, you can take that pawn too. Yeah. Take this one. Or checkmate over here somewhere. Everything is good. Yeah. Resignation. With 1.2 seconds left on the clock. So Gunina and Goryashkina, they have to play next round because they both have 6 points. Oh, gosh. 2 rooks can do well against a queen, but not in this position with your king on g3. That king's out in the open here. f4 check, just pawn storm. Even if it weren't going for a checkmating kind of attack, just pushing these pawns. Yikes. And you can't stop it. f3. Protected by everything. Then e3 is protected by the queen. Just push him. I guess move order doesn't entirely matter. And bishop f3 goes to win one of the rooks. No, this is it. Let's keep on going. Oh, another king getting checkmated. Queen g6, rook h8 is checkmate. Because you have to block on g7. So first queen g6, there it is, and then rook h8 mate. That is a brutal final position. Can't look at that anymore. Chelsea Monica. And you're back. Pomegranate 988. So pomegranate is the national fruit of Armenia. I wonder if it's also the national fruit of Georgia, where pomegranate's from. So rook takes in d7. We have an extra pawn here for black, but very importantly, the black king can't get out. So there's going to be compensation in the form of X. Oh! Ooh! Ooh! I know what happened. She thought the rook was going to take, and then she was going to try to make this draw here. And instead of the rook capturing back and the king captured, which is the best move by far, because now you have control over the c file. Oh gosh, yeah, that's unfortunate. Okay, black had a good position regardless, so it's not like she blundered away a winning or drawing position, but still, you kind of make a pre-move hoping that your opponent's taking, but it doesn't work out. So that was Bela Kotinashvili with the win. Very strong Georgian Grandmaster. Ooh, what's happening here? So there are many pawns. but they're not going quickly enough. But if you take here, do you start allowing the pawns to go? I'm starting to get worried that black might not win this game. So maybe play rook c... I don't like bringing the rook so close gives the king a tempo. So even though it may not be the end of the world, like, I don't like having this. Look at this, king f6, take, there's bishop d5 at the end. Okay, so you get away with this, but in general, having the rook so close to the enemy king felt like a risky decision. And just show that one more time. Just because I get king f6 with a tempo. It didn't matter in this game because she had worked this all out, but it probably just means that bringing the rook instead of all the way over here could have been more useful. Just avoiding any tempo gaining king move. But okay, she won the game. Deserved victory. And black won on time. I was like, who won? I saw the result happen and I saw it, but I was like, wait, what? Black won on time. So time is of the essence. Goryachkina versus Gunina. I'm going to start opening these games because we have now many top battles. Let's start with Goryachkina and Gunina. I think they're going to play this one out. The thing is, the top 8 make it to the knockout, and they're firmly entrenched atop the standings. They could make a draw and just protect their placement, but they'll do it for the fans. And Goryachkina has white. She is the higher rated in terms of classical chess. Obviously, in online chess is a different story, and Gunina's rating there 2664 in her Blitz chess here on chess.com. That's a really strong Blitz player. So knight b to d2. This is, you're blocking the check. You're just thinking, if you were going to take on d2, I'm not going to trade bishops with you. I'm going to offer you my knight. And that just gives an imbalance. That's the word I'm looking for. It gives an imbalance to the position, where instead of me offering a bishop trade and the bishop retreats, now the knight's on d2. So you can try to play b3, but then black will play bishop c3. So taking on c4 while the knight's pinned is useful. If you castle, then black can consider c3, using the extra pawn, ramming it forward, and trading it off for one of your non-doubled pawns. So a3 played. That's the right choice. And the bishop you could take on d2. You can also retreat. So taking on d2, bishop takes. This pawn on c4 is one that can stay on the board for a bit. I would play knight to c6, which also attacks this pawn on d4. And by playing knight to c6, I'm also closing down the diagonal for the moment, and maybe eventually I'll try to play b5. So there's knight c6 by Gunina. I think just a simple e3. And you do have to take a look for e5. It's a move that's often played. Also knight to e4, trying to get this bishop. So I think that Gunina, she knows this opening. She feels comfortable in it. And Goryachkina is a little ahead on the clock, but nothing too drastic has happened yet. All right, e3. And rook b8 to go b5. There it is. So the difference between playing b5 right away and rook b8 is just to avoid any kind of problems where your knight gets stuck on the diagonal. So here b5 is certainly possible. It still gives control of many of the important squares on the queen side to white. The bishop on g2 is the best piece on the board. In any sort of Catalan type of structure, bishop on g2 is a dominant piece. I'm going to go to this game here, board 2. It's an exchange Slav and h3 played. So the queen on c2, bishop on d3 lined up over here. And white can just continue developing. Right? Knight to e2, maybe knight to f3, depending on what black does. Castle. Black is behind in development. This knight on a5 isn't threatening. It can come to c4. Then what? It's on a good square, but it's not actually attacking anything. So these sort of exchange Slavs have more bite to them than I think people realize, just because it's not easy to see how black finalizes her development and where her pieces exactly belong. But black is doing okay. What's going on here? We have Kotanashvili, that's Pomegranate, taking on Harika Dronavali. So two Grandmasters here. And e4, so this e6 square is covered, of course. And bishop c4 check can be blocked. What happened here? D takes e4, f5. Oh my gosh, the center opened. She didn't react properly, because I guess she forgot that this f pawn goes to f4, and if you do something else, I go f4 and get your bishop, and so she had to go bishop g5. Any knight move is f4. Here we have the trade and then e4, and unfortunately for White, you're stuck because you can bring your knight back here, which brings up to e5. Isn't this knight just trapped here? So can I take first? Yeah, so it takes, chop, chop, and h6. This knight's just totally trapped. You have one check on c4. I go king g7. No more checks. Your knight's trapped. You have to sacrifice it for 2 pawns here. So it's not game over. By no means is it game over. But, of course, black is going to be the one who's happy with an extra knight. So let's go back to the Goryachkina game against Gunina. This queen came to d5. So endgames tend to be pretty good for white, which is why there's this queen tension. You want rook a to c1 first. If you take on d5, though, like, take on d5, e takes d5. I'm not sure how you're going to make progress. This knight on e4 is very, very strong here. White is still better, but there's a lot left to prove. So, we'll see. It looks, to me, just very plain. You can drop your queen back. You can take on d5 at any moment. You have plenty of good options. And that's why it says +1 despite the equal material. The bishops will reign supreme. Okay, let's keep on going to more games here. Whoa, what's going on here? So, 6 pawns per side. This pawn on b2 is a target, thanks to the queen and rook staring down. This a6 pawn will need the defense of the queen. This pawn on d6 can be a target, but right now there's a bishop on e5 protected. If you play f4, just play it here, hitting this bishop. This is exposing white's kingside. It's not the end of the world. It's still safe for now, but it does worry me when I see this f4 because I look at the g3 square and there's only the king defending it. So watch out if you are playing a position like this from the white side. There could be a sacrifice. There could be a bishop to d4 at the right moment. In fact, instead of bishop g7, maybe bishop d4 was a decent move here. But I understand not wanting to put your bishop too far out in the open. All right, so we see the extra, wait, not extra piece. We have a rook for 2 minor pieces. So 2 rooks versus knight, bishop, and rook. Oh, good tactical find there. Okay, let's go back. So we went knight f7 to give up the minor piece for the rook, and then you want to develop, but this is a check. So it gets the check in, and rook c7, rook to b8 play to protect b7, and then try to take this pawn e5. But can't white start going after some of these pawns? I guess the open file will be very valuable to black. So it's only 1 extra pawn, and rook endgames with just an extra pawn are notoriously hard to win, especially if white's rook is active and your rook stays passive defending this b7 pawn. If you go king d6, I have rook to g7. That's a nice save there by white. I mean, that was looking like a lost position. Now, all of a sudden, I don't think white is really in too much danger of losing thanks to the activity. Nice play. What's going on here? This game got exciting. This was the exchange Slav, where I was talking about how there's more bite to the position that people realize. Knight f3 was played to hop this knight in, capture. And so you have the compromised pawn structure. So she brings her king into e2, saying my king's not going to get in any trouble here. But is that actually accurate? Queen d6 went after g3. h5, you saw a trade here. And now this rook came to f4. That's a pretty annoying rook. But watch out for a timely h4. I would really be looking at this move h4 because it frees up the h5 square for the knight. And now h4, there might be g4. Okay, I'm thinking about taking here and then taking with my queen to try to get a pin. But I don't like that my king's on e7. It's probably too risky. Oh, my rook was hanging there too. Right, they give this some kind of knight takes d5 at the right moment. So rook g5, trying to go rook g8, I imagine. At some point play knight e2 just to defend g3. But I don't really want to move my knight with your rook staring at my queen. Let's go back to Goryachkina. We'll come back here. We'll go back to Goryachkina versus Gunina. a5. So this rook, it's out in the open. And actually, it doesn't have too many squares. So rook b4, now the pawn's under attack. So knight d5, you just steal that pawn. But the rook has no safe squares. Except for this one. And b5 is very weakening. So c5 played. and takes, trying to get the c file. That's a logical decision. So taking on c5, I think that Green will take with a knight, because once you take with a knight, you protect this pawn on a4, and then your knight can even consider coming into b3. And actually, white has to be careful all of a sudden, because if the position opens up and I can trade rooks and get a rook on the first rank, the white king will be in danger. The black king doesn't look like it's in too much of harm's way. So rook takes c5, knight takes c5, bishop c3. I like this more for white than I did the line with the other rooks on the board, because if the rooks was on c8 and c1, playing bishop c3 would allow black to take over the open file. Now I would have to play rook c8 just to get to the open file, or rook to d8 to get to d1. But after rook d8, I see what you're doing, trying to checkmate me, and rook to d4. Good move. Very good move. Bishop b4 is a new threat with both knights under attack. Knight d5 is a good response. If you take on d5, you get opposite colored bishops, and that gives black much better drawing chances. And time situation, both players under 30 seconds. Oh gosh, under 25 now for Goryachkina. This is not an easy position to play, not by any means. If you want to make it easy, you take on d5 and you say, I'll never really lose this. There's rook to d2 and bishop back to b5. So Gunina playing this very quickly. I would have taken with the rook. I would have taken with the rook there to trade off the rooks. I wonder if Gunina's playing for more. Oh. Thankfully the knight's on e5 protecting, because otherwise that would have been devastating. Okay, now she answers that question. They make a draw. Very good practical decision by Goryachkina. I thought Gunina might have been trying to play for some time, because here, if instead of pawn takes d5, which turned out fine, rook takes d5, you trade rooks, think about it. What can attack this square? Well, this bishop certainly can't, only this knight, and then I can always drop my bishop or bring my king in. I thought that there were some chances there for white, but no time on the clock, making a draw. So let's keep on going. What's happening here? It looks like this is just a rook dominating a bishop. Here comes the king. Good decision. Very good decision. And we now have three players at 6.5 out of 7. We have Irina Bulmaga there with 6 out of 7. Iri Bu. Didn't see her in the field, but all of a sudden she's been climbing up the leaderboards, because she was at 4 out of 5 or so. She's won her last 2 games. And this is just winning. Now you have 2 split pawns. The bishop can only do so much. You can give a check. Bring the king in. And checkmate. King here. Okay, king c6 and rook there with checkmate. But this is clearly good enough. Okay. There's still plenty of games here. Ooh. 2 rooks in the 7th rank looks scary. But how does the king get a check? The king will have to walk down the board. Don't make a draw? Ooh, that could come back to hurt in the final standings. And this... Oh, no. Go to the end. At this point here, you can just walk your king back. So here, king g5. Here, king h4. Like, I understand there may be a check and you're worried about getting your king checkmated, but the king can walk back. And if the king walks back, you have these 2 rooks on the 7th rank. Should never be able to get checkmated unless you make a huge blunder. And if this rook ever leaves the last rank, I give you a check and trade rooks. This rook can't leave the g file, because if you take, there's check, check, and the other rook comes with mate. So here, check, here, and mate. So I think that white could have tried to play on. And in blitz games, especially when you're down to the wire there. Oh, if white only had 3 seconds, then I can't really blame her for that choice. I wasn't looking at the exact time. I just feel like in a blitz game, you have to go for it. What is happening here? Oh, it's check. Bam. That king's in check. That rook is in trouble. So that's a nice win there. Actually, this was walked right into it. Could have moved the king up and try to push the pawn, but when you have very little time, you make these kind of mistakes that you wouldn't ordinarily make. Ooh, this is another interesting endgame. White's pawn looks faster, but the king is blocking the progress. So queen f7. Check to take away the b2 square. Yeah, this is just... You can trade queens now, queen e7. And then you both promote. This is a... They're just going to repeat moves. Oh! 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 Not a good move! But it's okay, because this is a draw. Theoretically drawn position. You have the rook pawn. Both players know it. Give a bunch of checks. Hope that she makes a mistake. She's not going to make a mistake. You just keep your king like this, and anytime there's a check on the g file, you try to stalemate yourself. You'll see it play out. This is all right. So far, 100% perfect. King f8 also works. Typically, you'll king g8 check here, and then you would have to go here, and you move your king in. But note that this is stalemate. So if this pawn were one line over, if you could just shuffle everything one line over, then the king could start marching in. But here, as you see, the king marches in. It's stalemate, no moves. So just an instructive endgame there. We have the next round. We have Gunina versus Stefanova. All right. All right. So now we have this knight h4. You don't see that move played so early. Hitting this bishop on f5. And now causing some think, because that is a move you really don't see somebody just voluntarily put the knight on the edge of the board, and bishop g6 was the choice. So that indicates to me that she was kind of worried about e3 bishop d3 without her bishop here. So essentially that the knight h4 wouldn't be so bad. White would take the diagonal. I have never seen this move knight h4 on move 4. Not a single time. And it's just shocking to see. So, okay, bishop on g5. It feels like black is very solid here. I understand that white has the bishop pair, but look at this pawn structure. This light square bishop, why is that an advantage? I would like to have somebody explain it to me. Having the bishop pair is obviously the two bishops advantage. You hear that all the time. But this bishop needs a diagonal to work with. And when you have this setup here with the triangle pawns, or the pyramid, from b7, d5, and f7, d5, the bishop on f1 isn't really in open space. So without being able to use that to your advantage, the bishop actually doesn't create much of an edge here. And the knights can hop over the pawns. All the pawns are on the board, so knights can jump out here. So knight f8. I don't think I like knight f8. Is your plan really to bring this knight to h7? I guess so. Maybe it's... I didn't give enough credit. It's actually pretty creative. Because by playing knight h7, you're forcing this bishop off the board. Wow, that is... This game is all sorts of weird in the best way possible. The more I looked at it, the knight h4 move I like. The more I look at it, this knight f8, knight h7, I like that too. And Anna Ushenina with the white pieces, taking on Goryashkina here. It's now looking very solid for both queen and bishop, but opposite colored bishops. So that's the dynamic that we'll see unfold. Let us go back to the game between Gunina and Stefanova. We have an endgame here, pure endgame. Knight c4 with rook d6 check. That's on the radar. So knight h6 play to come knight f7. This is a very good move because not only does knight f7 protect d6, it also protects d8, so that I can play rook to d8, bring my knight back, trade everything on the d file. Another thing to look out for though is knight a5, because when I get knight a5 in, I'm hitting b7, and b7 can't move because the c6 pawn is weak. So knight a5 is just one of these sort of typical ideas to challenge your opponent's pawn structure. So knight h4 trying to come to f5. Probably wouldn't allow that. At least wouldn't make it so easy. g6 takes it away. And this pawn is perfectly well defended, so it's not creating any sort of weakness. Alright, let's keep on going. Let's go to Irina Bumaga. So what is happening here? This is a French defense here, where the position has really opened up. So if you take on d2, I take back, you take my knight, I take your knight with check. So not going to take here. Taking back an e6 makes sense. Where is this knight going? And it's a knight to e2. I mean, white's pieces are not coordinated very well. These knights are stepping on each other's toes. The bishop can't move. Black has the two bishops. Black has castle to safety. The rooks are connected. My next move will be some kind of knight. Now, maybe knight to e5 is best because I'm trying to get to g4. You put an f3, so preemptively, you're taking away squares from my knight. You're blocking the bishop, but it's still looking very sad. Knight to c5 played, trying to trade rooks, get the d file under your control. Oh, this is no fun. King c1. I can play bishop g5, which pins the rook, so you have to play f4. But then when you play f4, my bishop on b7 feels very happy again. And what now? Knight c1. If I play rook to d1, that's actually probably not a great move because the rook on h1 is protected. So if I'm going to go for rook d1 ideas, I probably want to kick your knight out first. Instead, bishop f6 plays, so bishop c4 puts pressure on e6. The knight is here and can't be kicked out very easily, but watch out for knight to b3 at the right time. Bishop d5 says, nah, you're not going to trade off these knights and win the e6 pawn and play bishop d5. If we trade bishops, the rook takes, there's the d2 square. It's looking more and more promising for black. What if I take, and you can't take with the knight because knight a4 comes right after b2. You can take with a knight, I should say, but it has a problem to take. Oh, gosh. In comes this rook. Maybe there's some kind of knight e2 here? Yeah, this knight to e2. Just shut off the second rank. Still looks bad, though. Black is so active. You know, you shut off the second rank for a turn. That's all you're doing. Let's see. All right, we'll come back to this game. It looks way too good for black here. All right, Anna Ushenina versus Goryachkina. What's happening here? So white is not up a pawn because they're double F pawns here. Trying to go king g2 and slow play this thing. Maybe knight g5 now. Knight g5 looked really good coming after the f7 pawn. And with knight to g5, there are also threats of bishop takes f7. So knight g5 was played here. And what to do? I don't really see an easy move for black to play. Because you want to trade all the rooks in d8, but at the end of that, this pawn f7 is under attack. So you don't actually have the ability to just swap rook after rook. So rook d6 was the choice, but you're giving me the d file, so rook to d1, well played. And I don't think I mind you taking on g5. I take back with my pawn, so I should bring my king in. King f3. Looks strong. Maybe I'll get my king to f4. Maybe I'll just start advancing my king up the board. So rook d2 instead was played. I just don't see exactly what black does here. Like c5, c4. It's so committal. You free up a lot of the light squares, and I have a light square bishop. Tough position. Gunina versus Stefanova. Wait. Huh? I thought it was very level before. So what happened here? G6, knight to d6, and she had to sacrifice her rook. She didn't have to. She chose to. So f4 may have been a mistake in retrospect because here's this pawn, and the king's under attack as well. So sacrificed. Now white is down in exchange, but black's pawns are very bad. These are some bad pawns. I think you can just take. Yeah, just take the pawn here. And white is down a full exchange. Black can play b6. Good move, b6. It's a really nice move. You just don't want to allow this knight into the action. So you play b6 to kick the knight. Then you're going to take on c4 with check. Or now not check because your king can check first. But you can just play your king over to f6. You can also if you play e7, you give this check in. So king f6 is good. This knight can come to c6, but then I take this pawn here. And it looks like Goryachkina and Ushenina drew their game. And so what's going on in the standings here? So we have 7 out of 8 Goryachkina. Wow. Okay, so the knights are in, but just stole this pawn. What next? I don't see a clear follow-up for black, but maybe you don't need to do anything too drastic. Just play rook to e8, rook to e4. Just kind of play the natural moves. Bring your rook to an open file. Give the king a check. Take control of the e3 square. Now if you're g4, you should probably take. So take back. Ooh, can I take this? King takes, knight e3 check. Is that possible? Looks possible. Looks good. So missed opportunity. And the longer this game continues, then if this rook can somehow come after these pawns here, white has some chances. This king is not feeling so happy. These knights are doing pretty well to defend each other. So rook e8. King g3. All right, giving the king a check. The king is now safe here. This knight doesn't have a check. The rook covers both. I think some kind of a rook e4, knight e3 type of thing. So rook e3 check first. Now this check's in the air. I'm starting to feel like white might survive this game. It was a really, really, really bad position, but I'm starting to get the feeling that this position is going to be survived. And that would be really bad news for Stefanova. She'll still end up making it to the bracket, the final 8 players, if she's not, even if she's not able to win this game. But you're up in exchange. You got this. So this is a threat, or is it? Because I have king d7, but then I have rook g7 check. I don't want to give so many checks. So king f7, king here. Is she going to put a king in the corner? Wasn't given the opportunity. The rook comes to d7. Can I go king g5, or is that probably king g5? There's rook f8, cutting the king off, threatening mate. Dang, that was pretty nice. So knight f5. King's down the corner. We're into a real bullet scramble in the near future. I played knight to d4. Bring this knight back. Getting tricky. And I knew this sacrifice was happening, but knight f7 check. If you take on f5, there's knight f7 check. She missed that. She completely missed that. Rook d5. You can't take on f5 because rook takes e5. This knight f7 check idea. Oh no. Oh no, this is starting to get problematic. You can't move your rook off the back rank. Rook d8 checkmate. Now here comes the king with the pawn. f6, f7. Oh my gosh, this game turned around so quickly. f7 now. And if the rook leaves the back rank, you have rook b8 check, and then you checkmate with the queen. So can you just take rook a7? Or yeah, rook a7. What's going on here? Is this somehow going to be a draw now? I'm like losing the thread of this position. This game has been absolutely back and forth, and it happens when you have 15 seconds left. So the problem is this rook is totally stuck. So black can go king f8, and if the rook goes this way, you lose a6. If your rook goes this way, you lose f7. And all black has to do is shuffle the king back and forth. And right now we have a big tie towards the top with 6.5 points, and many people at 6 out of 8 as well. So there's a chance for anyone in that score group with 6 points or more to qualify for the knockout. And they made a draw. Wow. What a game. Like it turned around really quickly over here. And the reason why is because when you're head material, you're often told, maybe you should sacrifice them back. And she took this knight here. But what she missed was that if a rook takes f5, there's knight f7 check. And if your king goes to g7, I have knight d6 check. If your king goes to g8, I have knight h6 check, forking your king and your rook. So that was an oversight, missing the knight forks. Knights are very tricky. We still have plenty of games left in this round. Ooh, so it looks like Liliani here is going to move. Oh, rook a5. It was losing anyway, so it doesn't make a difference. But if you capture here, just king takes, your pawn can't even move. I'm going to take this pawn next. White's completely winning. And maybe we're just hoping for some kind of pre-move and losing on time. Oh, we have a winning position now. Unlike before when the pawn was on... What? Oh no, they repeated moves. This is winning for white. You just move your king up. But when you have no time, you freak out. So the other position was drawn because the king was and pawn were up one. Here it's losing because king f6, your only legal move is king to h1, and then I steal your pawn. So without much time on the clock, unfortunately, There was a draw. So we have Stefanova taking on Kayu Ning. We have Gunina taking on Harika Jonavali. Wouldn't be totally shocked if some players just start taking a couple draws to ensure their qualification, but then you start relying on tie breaks. And with so many people at 6 out of 8, if you have 6.5 and go to 7, you might not make it. So I get it why here White sort of has to play for it. Goryachkina is happy to make a draw. She makes a draw. She goes 7.5. She for sure is in. But yeah, there is increment, everybody. 5-minute plus 1 second increment. And the knight on b5 takes on d4. Your knight on f3 protects this pawn on e5. Knight can come out to c6 to challenge in the center, challenge this pawn. This bishop will always have the long diagonal to work with. So knight e7 played first. That way you reinforce this knight to c6, or you can play knight g6 to come after this pawn. Let's keep looking at the various games here. You have a player who doesn't know their game started. That's not good. Well, Ushena will be happy if that's the case. Okay, we have a game here where White has better control of the space and the center. And so that's, of course, looking good for White. And Black says, well, I'm very solid here. So my rook on c8, the knight's on b4. What's the knight doing out here? Oh, nice tactic. Look at that. The knight went to b4, offering the bishop trade. The bishop went back to c4, so that was a bad move. Because knight e4, if knight takes d5, I'm forking your pieces. Nice. Nice tactical alertness. And what next? So d5, where's this knight going to? Knight to c5, but I can just take your bishop and I have the bishop pair. And, alright. This is nice under attack. You can probably just drop it back. You can actually play knight a6 if you want, because this knight's pinned. I don't really like putting the knight back over there. Knight c6, but then I lose b7. So maybe a5 is the move? To protect the knight, try to threaten b6. So better for Black, but nothing overwhelming. Nothing overwhelming here. And let's keep going with some of these games because 6 points, you're on the outside. Yeah, you still have a chance. If you win the game, 7 points will likely be a tie for one of those top 8 spots, but you better have good tie breaks. And here, White's position doesn't look very good. It's the typical structure where it's like a reverse Benoni, because you have this pawn d3, and the Benoni just structurally is bad no matter what side you're playing with. Ooh, bishop g4, f3, look at this bishop on g2. And the bishop on g2 is not happy at all. This bishop can come into c3 now. Then you can play a5 to close down the queen side. Maybe play a4 if you ever want to open that queen side up, or play b5. This is not a position you're happy about. Look at your pieces with no squares, no space. And generally speaking, you want to strike back later in the game. You're kind of hoping the position stays close, so later you can fight back with a timely f4 type of break, getting your bishop into life, getting the other bishop out, but Black has amazing control. So Stefanova here with the white pieces, she's just worse. Black is active. If you play c5, in comes my bishop to d5. So yeah, it's all about this tension here. Yeah, you can keep it though. You can always just capture back. So I like that move coming to c5. I definitely like that move. So is Black actually better? Now that that move's been played, I'm not so sure. She probably is level, but the bishop on c5 will be very annoying. Black will probably play e5 to just take away the d4 pawn. But for now, the idea of bishop c5 feels quite annoyingly strong. So, let's see. Okay, bishop a6, hoping for c5. Bishop comes to c5. And now f5. So protecting this pawn e4, but getting rid of any e5 ideas. So you allow this bishop to stay on c5. That's actually extremely frustrating. So I like black's position at the start. Now all of a sudden I like white's position. Just the pieces are working together well. And let us keep going through these games here. Goryachkina has a good position. Sorry with the French. I recognize this pawn structure here where you take away from the center to open up the f-file for your pieces. Watch out because rook f4 is a threat, but there's queen to d1 protecting the bishop. But if you just play one little inaccuracy and rook f4 comes and your bishop on d4 is in trouble, that's not going to be a happy occasion. So that's why you see queen f7 played is going after f2. Why couldn't you take on f2 right away? Rook takes f2 was possible, but then rook to c3 hits the queen, and then there's this rook on f2 under attack. So that's probably, well, then there's rook f1 check. So I guess the e6 pawn, that's the obvious reason why. The e6 pawn hangs, and so queen f7 does both. It puts more pressure on f2, it protects pawn e6. And rook to g3. Can I sacrifice? I want to, but this pawn e6 will still be weak. So I want to sacrifice. I probably shouldn't. I always say not my piece is easier for me to sacrifice. g5 is h5 coming? No, probably h6. Just giving the queen more space here. The queen coming to g6. I can play rook f4. Okay, all these light squares are about to be a problem. Something tells me h5 is a possibility too. h5 and wait, where's this queen going? D. Oh, but now the rook's in c2, so bishop a4. So rook, I guess rook f4 also works here. Bishop a4. That's a problem. The rook actually went into a terrible spot. Let's see if Goryachkina finds it. Because if she finds it, she'll go to. She plays rook f4. She's definitely finding it. Bishop a4 is coming. There it is. Unfortunately, this was not a flawless fight from White's point of view because this rook on c2 walked itself into a pin. And now after bishop takes, you can at some point consider giving up your rook for here, but let's just play queen f5. Let's trade off the queens. Let's make our lives as easy as possible. The queen has to stay attached to f2 because otherwise I will sacrifice my rook for the bishop and go for the king. So rook takes d4 is possible. Rook takes f2 is possible. I like taking, and just taking here. Because then I'm going to go rook f1, I'm going to go queen g1, and I'm going to checkmate this king. Looks very straightforward. So queen a4. I think it's rook takes d4. We had two results coming at the same time. It looks like Gunina won her game. Wow. It happened in the last bunch of... I mean, it was a Benoni. Even though it's starting at King's Indian. What happened here? This was threatening. And so it's eventually... This just crushing. Down a pawn, but all the pieces are developed for white, whereas black's pieces are not. So it's sacrificing a piece and taking it back. Dang, that hurts to look at. That was really nice. So let's go back to the flawless fighter taking on Goryachkina. Didn't take on d4 earlier. And maybe now queen a4. Okay, I thought queen a4 was good because you actually threatened to trap the queen over here. This still is good. The rook's on the open line. Queen c4 I'm not positive about because if I take on c4 and you take back, the position gets very closed, and in the endgame, maybe the extra exchange will not be quite enough. It likely will be, but something to consider. Stefanova. Okay, queen trade offered. And then this pawn is lost. So the black king will have to run this way. And the white king is way slow. But you have some time. Bishop d4. Yeah, the thing is if this king starts running out this way, I will attack your pawn and then sacrifice my pawn so your bishop no longer will protect this piece. Goryachkina drew her game. That's surprising. She probably did it just to ensure her qualification, but she had a very good position here. So that makes sense. She wants to make sure she doesn't slip up and lose in time trouble or anything like that. So she goes on to qualify. We have many players fighting for those last spots, right? 8 players get in. Just 8 players. So, heading down the stretch here. The final stretch. Okay, so what's happening here? The black king is cutting off the white king. Just going to repeat these moves. If the king goes too far this way, the black king comes in. Yeah, all the pawns are on light squares. You need your king to be on out in the open. And king f2, king e6. You're going to bring a king here. I'll keep my king at f7. And then shuffle my bishop back and forth, a6 to c8. This one will be a draw. Let's look at this game here between Karina Chess. Somehow this king feels like it should be getting checkmated. Don't play queen f5. That would be a bad move. Queen h1. King g4. Where's the mate? Maybe rook f5. Start with rook f5. Other than this queen d8, queen h4. So rook f6. It's way better. You have your rook coming to h6. No, that's just way smarter. Queen 2. Yeah, rook h6 mate. Nice win at the end there. Yeah, these pawns were advanced, and so you just need one piece to attack this king. Rook f5, queen d8 check, king h7, queen h4. Ah, that actually wins. Because we go queen h4, I trade, and then I take your pawn, and then I take this pawn. I just take all your pawns. So it was winning, but rook f6 was probably better. What's going on here? White is winning in this game. Oh, I would have put my queen on c3. This is now queen d3. Okay, king is safe. Pushing forward. 15 seconds to 2 seconds. Queen c4 is good. Push the c-pawn. King b2. Okay, c7. Queen here, queen here, queen here. Or bring the bishop out here also works. And if I were black, I would have tried to go like queen a6. Just try for some cheapo. This isn't queen h8 mate. Oh, there was mate here. Just trying to protect the king. Now the king's fully protected. Ooh, okay, white went on time. So playing for the clock, white was winning on the board too. And this position, you just have to be careful not to blunder. Although I don't even know if it's possible to blunder. So don't go bishop c8 here. And even that's still a draw. No. It's close. So bishop c8, I'll go a6 check. That's why you don't want to put your bishop here. Now you can do it, and then bring it back to h3. Oh, king got caught. I don't know if a6. Stalemate. Beautiful. Beautiful way to end this game. The king is caught, but that's a good thing for black in this case because king can't move, and it's not in check. That's stalemate. So you're just ending the game on the spot. Well done. So we have one game left. Doesn't impact the standings. Well, it might impact the standings actually because look at that tie from 7th through 11th place. And while neither of these players can tie towards the top, the final standings, the tie breaks will be updated as soon as the final game concludes. And so for now, the players that are there with 7 and 9, Flawless Fighter and Cuckoos, that can change at the end of this game. So, yeah, the knight came back. As long as you can sacrifice your bishop for the pawn, you're not going to lose this game. And the clock situation, though, that's the problem. 92, I would just throw in a check. Or play 94, hoping for a pre-move. Wasn't anticipating a check. That was close. Barely got that move off. 1.5 seconds. Oh my gosh. It says zeros. That was playing like a millisecond left. It said zeros, but that means there was like barely enough time. And 94 loss on time. It's hard to play blitz chess. Well, that means the standing... Wait. Flawless Fighter and Zool are tied in 8th place. Ooh. Ooh, we just had this in the Speed Chess Championship Grand Prix on the title Tuesday. So they are tied, but I guess Flawless Fighter will go through. Well, I'm going to take a break because we're going to get everybody set up, get all the players who qualified notified, get them ready for their matches, get them on camera so that they are ready to play, and that way fair play will continue to be upheld. But dang, that stinks to tie on tie breaks and then to lose out in the second tie breaks. But I will be back in just a couple minutes. Stay tuned, everybody. We'll be back with the knockout portion, 2-game mini matches, where if you lose the match, you're out of it. So I will be back in just a few. And we are back here. The games are going. We see that we have Paulina Shuvalova on screen here. She has the black pieces against Valentina Gunina, so a tough matchup for her. But we have the bracket in front of you right there. You see that Gunina versus Shuvalova, excuse me. We have Kayu Ning versus Goryachkina. We have Antonetta Stefanova taking on Pamini Rout. And we have Torki Yanova taking on Ushenina. So here in this position, we have a queenless position already. So from the very start of this game, it's like, I don't want queens on the board. Gunina's like, nah, let's get those off. Let me try to outplay you. And we actually just saw in Endgame with her against Stefanova. So here, it's a very solid position, still very early in the game. We'll see how this one develops. But for now, very calm. We see that black reacting accordingly, developing the piece. And where are the natural squares? That's the question. That's the essential question. Do I bring my knight to f6, or does that allow e5? Was knight coming to g5 to put pressure on f7? Many questions here, and not easy to answer all of them. This knight can actually come to g4, where it hits the bishop and then the pawn f2. So I guess black is doing totally fine here. And we'll see how this one goes. So we have other matchups. Let me pull up those games. We have Alexandra Goryachkina taking on Kayu Ning. So let me pull her up real quick. And we have you can see all players, they're in a call designed to help fair play measures here. And she's at her computer. You see the camera on her, making sure that I didn't put it on. So you can see that everything is all good here. Players are being monitored, and of course the typical detection. So here you see white's position coming after the center, going for the d file. The queen's on d8. There's a rook on d1, trying to barrel through, and that's why e4 is such a strong move. It's just trying to take that file and win it. So black usually plays d4 here, and Goryachkina should play it to keep the file as close as possible for the moment. But you also don't want to allow white's pieces into the game. And black has an extra pawn, but look at this bishop, look at this bishop. Not exactly the most inspiring pieces. This bishop is behind a pawn here. So this is going to be a situation where there's going to be a lot of work cut out for. And I think that we can move on to a next game for now. We'll come back to this, as there are 4 games going on all at once. We have Stefanova taking on Padmini here, and we see this position where it seems like everything is okay, but looks can be deceiving. This king on g7 can be in harm's way. This rook can come to d1, this rook can come to c1, can take this pawn on c4. So looks like white has a better center, but black is quite solid. So how do you respond to bishop d5? I was going to say f3, but I was then worried about this capture here, and maybe even queen to d5, because the bishop on g2 isn't a happy piece anymore. Queen b6, she's playing for a more aggressive position. She doesn't want the endgame, but she can play rook to d8, go after the pawn here. e5 is the threat, because the pawn is pinned. Queen takes b2 is a move you don't want to play, because rook a b1 wins b7, and the queen on c4 is perfectly located, protecting e2, protecting a2. So with these squares defended, once the queen goes on b2, I just go rook to b1. And so I think black should start with rook f to d8, putting pressure on d4. You can maybe rook a to d8. I feel like somehow this rook belongs in d8, this rook belongs in c8, and I play for c5. But I don't really have to be worried about f7, but maybe keeping the rook here just in case and bringing the a rook over. But either way, I think that black is doing fine, and well, we'll see how this one continues here. So let's move on to the final game that we have not seen. We have Anna Ushenina playing against Gulruk Begim, Tokyo Yanova. And in this game, as we switch our cam's focus, we have 2 players who are competing on opposite sides of the board. There's an attack brewing in this position, and It's one that's looking quite unclear. So we see that, I don't know, Ushen, we have her on camera right now. She has the black pieces here. She has the open H file, and white is trying to attack on the queen side. So after the queen takes on g4 here, this pawn on e5 protected by the bishop, so for now that's okay. And f5 chosen. Wow, that's an aggressive approach. E takes f6, the king is no longer on b8, so there's no trouble here. And so that king doesn't fall in victim to a check. Now b5, okay, you just push your pawn. Maybe my knight can just go to e5, hitting the queen on g4 here. The h file is still open for the black rook. It's starting to feel like a really good position for black. I don't see white's attack picking up any steam, whereas for black over here, maybe I can just take your bishop. I kind of don't want to take the bishop. I don't want to allow this pawn to get to d3. I'm thinking knight c4, e5, e4, if I can push this pawn up. So knight c4 played. I think it's a very good move. And I'm guessing e5, e4 is to follow, but this knight can come to g4. So let's stop e5 though, because I really want to get to the h file. Your king is in all sorts of danger. If you take on c4, I take on g4 first, so I remove the threat on the e5 pawn. If you take on e5, I take back, you take here, and then some kind of queen this way. I need to get to that h file. That's all I know. It's all I need to know. But I need to get the queen over there. So white also is down plenty of time here. Really, it's a big time deficit. It's a tough position. So this is it's going to be a struggle. I actually don't even see a good move because e4 is going to hurt you. As mentioned, I could take on g4, play queen f8, play queen h6. So she does take this knight away and fix the rook on c4. That makes sense. You're keeping the pawns together in the center, where now you can play e4. What you took with the pawn on c4, your d pawn would be quicker, but your e pawn would be a potential target. So she's just avoiding any sort of targets in the position. Plays e4. Later, she can bring this queen over to the h file, go for a checkmate, and this is looking like it's going to be Ushen's game with the black pieces. That's a huge victory in a 2-game match, right? Winning with black, and then all you need is a draw with white. That would be a tremendous start. And I just don't see anything for white. You've no space. These pawns here are great. This open file is great. This king is bad. This rook is doing nothing. This rook isn't doing anything. So unfortunately for white, like, you're trying your best. There's b6, just throwing away the pawn, trying to get rid of it, and sensing some confusion on Anna's face. She's like, what? What's that? And the reason why she has that reaction is because she's making sure, can she take it? Does she have to take it? Because sometimes you get distracted, you go to that side of the board, and now the queen wants to get back over to h6, but it is a longer journey. So that kind of decoy move, I think, is one that made a lot of sense. And rook to b4, I think you can just gobble up on c2. Here comes d3 next. There's no attack anymore, not even a semblance of an attacking chance for white. And so move this bishop out the way, I don't know, here, bring the queen here. Just safe, practical play here by playing b6. And we see a resignation. So now that we've seen a resignation, we will switch games. And, oh, wait, they're starting their next game already. But we'll switch games for the moment. We'll go to Alexandra Goryachkina's game. I'll bring her up on camera real quick because there are just 4 games going on at once. 4 different matches here. And we have Goryachkina on camera and kind of slinking in the chair a little bit, but focused on the chess, just trying to make sure that she optimizes her winning chances here, and she is always very focused. So what's going on? The queen came to h5 with the check, and is there going to be some kind of repetition? No, because the bishop blocked. So wait, this knight is pinned. You have to go a6. Only move a6. If you... Oh. Yeah, that's a nice find by Caillou Ning here, playing g4, because now this queen's under attack, and this knight's under attack here. So you have, I guess, check, king over here, take this pawn. She's going for it. Queen takes e4. And then you have some bishop d6 check, right? You have to be a bit careful here. Bishop d6. And it doesn't work. King g1, there's always bishop back to f1. And actually there's no check on b1 to speak of because the queen covers it. Nah, this is just winning. But and it's not even a time scramble. It's only Goryachkina in time pressure. So it looks like Kai Ning is going to take this first game of the match against Alexandra Goryachkina. Alexandra needs to win the second game, otherwise she is eliminated from this bracket. Remember, the top 2 finishers in the bracket, they move on to qualify for the Women's Speed Chess Championship. So you got to get in the top 2. But this is over. So let's let me switch out of this game here. And, okay, resignation. The next game will start immediately. Let's go to the game between Gunina and Shuvalova. We started there. We haven't been there in a while. So let me pull up Valentina's camera. And, all right. So she's playing this endgame here. She's up a pawn if she takes on g6, then h5 may fall, but she lost a5. She can't take on h5. She needs the bishop protecting this pawn on c6. So, oh, there's the g-pawn. This is a good example of quality over quantity. White is down at pawn, but look at how advanced these pawns are. Here comes rook f8, and after rook f8, it's game over. Bishop d5 played. Trying to go rook d7 checkmate. That was nice. And get a queen. So, wait a second. This king will go to d6. The bishop will sit on e4. And from wherever it sits on this diagonal. And then this king will just go march and take the a-pawn. Take on e4. You have to take on e4. That was a really good effort by Shuvalova there with no time on Gunina's clock. Trying to just trick her. Pre-move bishop h1. I would put my bishop on h1. That way I don't have to risk anything. There it is. Now the bishop's on h1. There's no risk whatsoever. You can just safely pre-move king to b7 and get your queen. Wow. That was a crazy conclusion of that game. But a good try by Polina Shuvalova there, just attempting to trick her with this e4 move. Because if she didn't take the pawn, then it would have been game over. So let's switch games now because we have 4 different matches. Let's go. Why don't we go back to this matchup here. We see that Uchenna is taking on Tokyo Yanova, and it's a position where, because Uchenna won her first game, let me switch the camera, of course. Because Uchenna won the first game, she now can sort of play more relaxed with the white pieces. She doesn't need to win. Sometimes you have to play for a win, and that means that you go all out. But here, because she won her first game, she only needs a draw. And look at how solid White's position is. You have this pawn chain here from b2 to d4. That's very nice. It's all safe and sound here. And what's Black going to do? You put your rooks in the a5. That's a defensive mechanism rather than just being sort of any sort of aggressive. Your 2 rooks are behind a pawn. My 2 rooks are attacking that pawn over there. So perhaps b5, a4, things like this, just trying to make progress over here on the queen side. You have to play ambitiously. Maybe play g5 next, and even f5. I know that all these pawn moves, they'll create holes in your position, but at a certain point, you just got to go for it. You are down 1-0. If you draw, it's the same thing as a loss. So you really have to just go for it. I think g5 makes sense. Then you can even bring your king into g6. It's actually unclear where this king belongs. Does it belong in the center? Somewhere over here? I don't think so. Plays a4. So, do I go knight c2? Just to kind of close the position down. Do I take on a4? Do I play b4? b4 I'm not sure I like because the knight goes right into the c4 square. And then Black has a protected pawn out here. And the position is very close. So taking on a4. Take with the pawn. I don't think you want to trade pieces. Taking with the rook. You offer a rook trade. You're whittling it down. You're already down a point. You need to win. So I think b takes a4 makes the most sense. And she's also down a minute on the clock. So it's going to be hard to win a pretty level game when you're also down a minute on the clock. So trading here. Oh, she wants this knight c4 and knight takes b2. Watch out. That actually may be really smart. Bishop c7, probably only move. Because if she played knight to d3, knight b6, king f1, knight c4, this is thematic. King e2, you take on b2. So when the knight takes, you push your pawn to a3 where you attack this knight and the knight can't stop the pawn. You actually end up promoting. So that was a really tricky idea because I was like, why are you trading all the rooks off? That feels like it's just going to land you in a tough position to win. But she has this opportunity eventually to go knight b6, knight c4. That's why the bishop came to c7 to stop that. And with that stopped, I'm not sure how black is going to continue. Knight to g6. The bishop will come back to g3, or the pawn will go to g3. You don't want to allow this knight into h4, but knight g6 will be a good start. Definitely knight g6 now. You have to go for it. Simply must go for it. And I'm keeping an eye on some of the other games. This one is pretty interesting at this point in the end game. g3, e5. Just push. Honestly, she's getting pretty good chances to win a position like this because initially it looked like she wasn't going to get anything whatsoever. Now she at least has pawns in the center, and I don't see a plan for white. That's the biggest issue, is there's no concrete plan. Maybe bishop c5. Okay, knight c5 check is possible, but you're always concerned about getting into an endgame with just a bishop against a knight, because the knight can sit on a light square, as it currently is, and the dark square bishop can't attack it. So I actually think e4 makes sense. Inviting knight c5, inviting that trade, then bringing this knight into e5. Knights are very tricky in the endgame. King c6, also very logical, taking away the c5 square. I actually think black is really getting chances here. You're going to want to play for e4, but there's some knight f2, but then your king gets to d5? You want to time it right. You really want to time it. So bishop d6, no, I lose the pawn on g5. That's frustrating. I would love to play bishop d6 to try to go e4. How else do we make e4 happen? Maybe... It's all about this move. Ooh, b3. So we see a trade. That was a really good decision, I think, by Ushanina there. To trade off these pawns. Now, without pawns on the queen side, right? All of black's pawns are in the center or towards the king side. I can focus all of my energy in the center of the board now from white's point of view. And actually c4 probably is a good move. She plays it. If we trade pawns, getting closer and closer to having too few pieces to win a game like this, and now I actually get a light square blockade because I want to bring my king right there. King to d3. And then maybe to e4. But this knight is coming to c5. So that's why this knight came this way, is to prevent that idea. So let's look at some of the other games. I think that ultimately Ushanina is going to win this, not this game necessarily, but she's going to win the match because black needs to win, and I see no real path to do so, especially with under 20 seconds left. So actually, maybe we'll stay here for a bit. I am looking at some of the other games. They're interesting, but with only 19 seconds left, I mean, here bishop d6 actually just ices the game. She found it. Really nicely done. Extremely nicely done. So trading there, take on g5. Okay, now we can for sure go on to a different game. It looks like Ushanina is winning this one and moving forward. So let's go to the game between Stefanova here, because this game is now petering out. Let's go to the game between Stefanova, and we will pull up our camera because this one is a situation where she's smoking. Is that a cigarette? Whoa. Okay, well, ignoring that, isn't black just crushing here? You have a safe king, you're up a pawn, and this pawn on c3 is weak. And this looks like it's just going right after that one. There's no attack. You have one queen out on h5. So it's looking like it's going to be a problem here. I don't see anything you can do. Queen takes c3. That's good. Well, maybe there's some rook c1 stuff. Bishop takes d5. Okay, is e4 falling too? Rook d8. You can just take this one. Yeah, this is looking good. Rook d8 was a nice move. Nice find. Because you can take on d2, get 2 pieces for the rook, and also you're up nearly 2 minutes on the clock. So with 20 seconds left, it feels like Stefanova is going to win against Padmini. Just take this thing. There it is. And it's going to be should be a pretty smooth conversion. e3 is going to be a big threat. Knight comes into e5, and the white king will never find true shelter. It looks like Gunina just won her game, by the way. So Gunina wins 2-0 against Shuvalova. Let's go to the game between Goryachkina, and that one's pretty interesting here, where Goryachkina needs to win with the white pieces, and she's in a situation where she is better here. It looks better for her, but it's not a clear one. So it's going to be a tough finish. We will bring her up on camera just so we can show you how she's reacting here. Seems pretty calm as ever. Her back is against the wall, both, I guess, physically and in terms of proverbially in chess terms. So she's even material. Black has an extra pawn on the queen side. White has an extra pawn from the e through h file here. And can I get an attack? Can I bring this rook into the game? Feels like the thing to do. This rook is stuck defending f7. So rook c1, swinging the rook over, and only 17 seconds left for her. Not a lot of time. And this queen on h4, it's not actually attacking anything over here. So if you go rook d2, I have f2 so well protected by my pieces. Queen d8 was an excellent retreating move. g5, she wants to go h4. Okay, knight h7 played, h4. And I see that rook c7. This pawn will need defense, so the queen will come and take and protect the 7th rank. But this pin, it's an annoying pin. h5, watch out. Watch out here. Maybe queen e7. Queen e7, and she blundered f7 pawn with check. And she missed it. With under 10 seconds, she missed it. That pawn on f7 was hanging, but still. Ooh, knight g5, h6, g6. I think that's the wrong move order. h6, g6 would have blasted open this king, but it's hard to do with 5 seconds on your clock. Queen g3 played. This is still dangerous for black. h6, g6 coming. All right, watch out. There's a discovery. You have to move. Rook e2, king h3. What now? Queen d1. Uh-oh. Queen h1 check. Rook g2. There goes your queen. And unfortunately for Alexandra Goryachkina and her fans, that looks like she's just gone down in defeat. So we will take her off camera. It's unfortunate to see on her end. We still have one game left between Stefanova and Padmini. So we'll pull up that game here. And how are they handling this? So Padmini wait, it's going to be a draw. It was crushing earlier for Stefanova. So that means this match will be tied 1-1, which means that more chess to be played. More chess indeed. We are going to get a tie-break game here because it's tied 1-1, and the players need to get rematching here. So let me make sure that I don't miss the start of this one here. And it's going to start soon. And all right, that game was really, it was just looked like Stefanova had that one. She was on her way to a victory. I mean, the way she was playing this part of the game was excellent. And I guess Padmini found a way to just be annoying enough. Trade off queens, go into this endgame. e3 was played, which looks good because you're going after these pawns. But when you do this, the rook came to e1 with this pin, bishop h6. So it's still good for black. Where did she manage to really make her drawing chances? I don't know. It feels like black should be pressing here still to this point, and then the rook capture on e3. So going into this pawn up endgame, even though there are 2 pawns on the side of the board, unfortunately, there are theoretical draws. If you trade off the queenside pawns, this still should be a draw with optimal play by white. So then it ended up in a draw. In the end, just bare kings. So let's see what's happening here. Waiting for the heads up. So Padmini's still focused there, and here it is. We have liftoff. So we have our tiebreak game. It's tied 1-1, and Stefanova has the white pieces. I don't know if she realizes it's her move, but Padmini is waiting here patiently. What's going on? Did Stefanova leave and then... okay, maybe she wasn't at her chair, so they're gonna restart it. The danger of leaving your seat when your game can begin. And well, let's don't know what's happening. Well, we'll wait for the next game to begin. Seems like the players are just getting settled. And Stefanova versus Padmini, it's 1-1. So Padmini survived that. Also, it must be super late by her, right? India, well, I don't know where in India she is, but like 10.5-hour time difference. It's almost 1 p.m. here, which means it must be something kind of crazy. Like, I don't know, what time would it be? 1 plus 10.5, 11:30. It's 10:23. It's 9.5. Got it. Okay, so it's the good old Armageddon game. That's part of what was happening. So it's 4 minutes for black to start, 5 minutes for white. White simply must win this game. So Padmini is in a tough spot here. She has a minute less. She knows she has the draws. That's great. But that minute is so essential. And so what Stefanova is doing is she's trying to get active. She's going to bring her knight to e5, maybe play for g4. Now knight e5 for sure. So this pawn on c6 is a target. g4 is possible, especially if you move your bishop to b7 to defend it. She plays bishop d7. So she's afraid. Maybe afraid is strong, but she is aware of this possibility with g4 in the future. b3 is commonly played to stop this knight from getting forward. Otherwise, what's this knight doing on b6? So bishop g7 here. Good natural development. The best thing for black's position is the time. Is that white has spent 45 seconds, black is about to spend 30 seconds. So for Padmini, if she can continue moving quickly, confidently, and well, then her chances continue to improve. So a4 play, opening up the queenside. b4 probably is the response. You don't want to take on a4 and be stuck with this pawn here. c3. All right, our knight d3 coming into c5. Both of those are good options. I was thinking c3 to get a rook to c1 and pile up pressure on the c-file, but this makes perfect sense. But look at this knight. Padmini's bringing her knight from b6 to c8 to d6 to e4 into c3. That's an outpost. So the knight's in c3. I'm wondering if knight g4 is a move. Because I feel like... Oh, look at that move. It's played. I suggested it, which means it might not be the best move. But my idea was that I'm opening up my pieces, whereas I felt a little bit more cramped. That knight on e5 was really strong before. The knight on c5 doesn't quite feel as powerful. And here it is. And the good thing for white is you're stopping this pawn in its tracks. The bad thing is there's this knight on c3. So I have an outpost that I'm taking advantage of. So e5, either now or in the near future, will be tempting. Bishop f6. Good move. Hitting this pawn, trying to play g5. It feels like there are going to be great attacking chances. g5 now? Can I play just g5, break it open? She does it. And actually, Padmini's barely spent time. Queen d3, I think, is a very smart move. And that is an extremely smart move, because if the queens get traded, then black doesn't have an attack, and you may have gone too far in your quest for said an attack in the first place, because now your pawn's on h5, you don't have a g pawn, so you have an isolated pawn out here. White has the two bishops. I think Stefanova needs to move a little more quickly at this point. Keep the edge on the clock, because Padmini has under 3 minutes. Stefanova has barely over 3 minutes. And draw odds are such huge advantage in a blitz game, especially between two such strong players, that you need to maintain an edge on the clock. Yeah, White's position is certainly easy to play. And bishop c7, this pawn on a5, but move this knight. Do I take this? I might kind of want to take that. Like, takes. She went f5. But I was thinking, could you like sacrifice here and then take d4? 3 pawns for the piece. Don't mind if I do. So e4. All right, h3. And now this rook is trying to get active. But what if I take this pawn? Okay. You take, I take, and my bishop on c7 protects the king side. This e6 square is my knights for the taking. This is looking really tough for Padmini. Really, really tough. Actually, I don't know how to even challenge. Can you go for a trick with some kind of knight e3? Doesn't work. I was thinking like knight e3, takes, and if somehow my king gets caught on the h-file, there could be a checkmate, but your king can always take on g2. That's the big issue. So, she played knight e3. Kind of shocking. Check. Can take this pawn. I think she regrets not doing this earlier. By putting her pawn on f5, she actually was able to, unfortunately for her, she was able to be attacked. And takes, king takes, bishop takes d4, this knight comes into e6. That pawn was on f7 before, so there would have been no knight e6 with that pawn f7. So f5 was actually the critical moment of the game, and unfortunately for Padmini, it's going to cost her. She's also down close to a minute on the clock. So down in material, down on the clock. Only thing going for her is the draw odds and the fact that under 2 minutes anything can happen. So knight to e6. Good move, protecting d4. Okay, this does feel a little suspicious, but it works out. The rook can't double. This square, this square, this square, this square, all under White's control, which means that you're unable to bring a second rook into the game. This knight on c3, it has an outpost, should be good, can't move anywhere. Actually, I hardly see any moves here for black, and you see Padmini going into the think tank just because of that. King f6, ultimately the choice. Probably a good move. And you want to play bishop e5 check, but you can't because your bishop is pinned to your king. So what now? King takes f5 would be met by bishop takes d5 with check. So that's a problem. I don't really see a great move for black as a follow-up, but I also currently don't really see an easy move for white. So rook e1, sensible. Rook e5. Play king f2. You can also just take this bishop. Yeah, take it and go king f2 next. And after king f2, if there's rook g8, you have bishop h4 with a pin. And rook h3 played instead. Makes sense. Probably bishop f4. This configuration of bishops will be strong. And All right, now you just take, put your bishop on e5 or on c6. Oh, that's good. I was sort of going for checkmate. She's going to take on a5 at any moment she wants. It's funny, this knight was supposed to be good. It was supposed to be a good piece. Instead, it was just horsing around over there, and it never got to do anything. But 48 seconds left, so actually this could become a real time scramble. There's no increment, so Stefanova has to play quickly here. Watch out for rook h2, pawn d4 checkmate. King f2 played. I would go rook h2 quickly. It was rook d4. 34 seconds each. Okay, this actually is far from over. I am now getting concerned for Stefanova. It seems like Padmini recognizes the time situation a little bit better. King e6. Just get out, make sure you don't get checked. Oh, there's no check because the king went to f2. I don't like that move. It encourages rook f1 in the near future. Knight d5. Good move. This bishop's pinned. Take this. Take that pawn. Now take it. Okay, rook h8 is probably the only move. So now to watch out for knight h3. So rook g7, because bishop d8 would run to knight h3. King f6, good move. Go rook h7. Retreating move. Okay, this is... Oh my gosh, Padmini's going to take this one. It's now just pure bullet. 8 seconds. Rook f8 check. In the time scramble, she's going to take this one. Amazing. There was no knockout blow anywhere. And oh, she on the rook. Oh, you could have taken the rook and then pre-moved the rest of the way. And the thing is, a draw is a win for black, and a win is a win for black. That means that Padmini route, she wins the game and moves on to the semifinals. Oh my gosh. That is crazy. So we're going to move into the semifinals. And let me grab that for everybody. The next matchups are about to get underway. So stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. They'll start in just a few moments. That we know who our competitors are. So let us bring Ushenina versus Padmini. Wow, I cannot believe that just happened. So you saw the first round. Gunina beats Shuvalova. Kayuning beats Goryachkina, big upset. Stefanova loses in that heartbreaker there to Padmini route, and Anna Ushenina beats Tokyunova. So here we have our semifinal matchups. Let me see. The games will get started shortly. Moving on here. Wow. Can't believe that. That was definitely a position that should have been won, but it's what happens when, especially if you're not totally used to playing without increment, and they were playing 5-minute plus 1 second increment before that, and then it got into a position where, well, there's no more increment anymore, so you're in trouble. So where could she have ended the game? That's like my main question. Was there a moment where there was an easy task for white? It felt like Padmini deserves a lot of credit here. She never made the task that simple. She continually put some threats on. She didn't allow all of her pawns to fall without putting up any resistance. And yeah, this should have been a win for white based on the board and the clock, but you're searching for the win, and chess players often are perfectionists. They want to find the single best move. So they're like, wait, is bishop c7 the best? Okay, rook h4, king e3. She could have just taken on a5, but she's trying to keep all her pieces together. Then e5, and e5 is a weird move because it gives up a pawn, and then d takes. And maybe d takes was a big mistake because bishop takes would have kept the pawn structure intact. Instead, there was d takes. All this stuff happens here, and the game gets crazy. And in time trouble, mutual time trouble, they both have 17 seconds left. That's how games slip out of your hands. And as I know from full experience, and these, you can unfortunately not winning games. So let me pull up the games. Okay. So they should start any moment now. Just waiting for them to begin. We're going to the semifinals. And the semifinals, it's funny. The semifinals is actually a final, but it's two separate finals. Because the top two players qualify. So as long as you make it to the final from the bracket, you make it into the WSCC. So here we have, let's look at this. We'll start with Padmini's game because I am curious how she will handle this. We've been focused on her because she was in the tiebreaker. Here we have a Caro-Kann. And if I'm not mistaken, Padmini plays the Caro-Kann from the black side, so she should be well versed in this opening theory. Knight f6. You often see a capture on e4 instead, then the bishop comes to f5. But knight f6 is just not trying to release the tension too soon. Black's, I like my pawn structure here in the center, so instead of capturing and giving white some forward progress, I'm going to do this myself. Bring the knight to e4 and bishop d3. It looks like a weird move. Isn't your bishop on c1 bad now? Didn't my coach always tell me, hey, push your d-pawn, get your bishop out? But the thing is, if you take on c3, I take with my pawn, guess what? I get to move my bishop out, and I develop my bishop on d3. So I was able to move my d-pawn via trade rather than pushing it voluntarily. So the knight came to c5. I think bishop e2, then pawn d4 has to be calculated. Very weird. Like bishop e2, d4, I think b4 can be played. Hitting this knight. I don't want your knight to have control of e4. I don't want you to play d3, so I play b4. And the fact that Padmini is spending some time here. Ooh, she just wasn't familiar with the position, I guess. But somehow it's just still fine. d3, knight f4. Maybe she's more familiar than I am. Maybe I just have to take my words back. Because when you see d3, knight f4, or we'll see what she does here. But knight f4, it attacks this pawn. And if we trade on c2, then we'll play d4 and just expand very quickly. Wow, maybe I'm the fool. I think that's what happened. And bishop f5. So now this is a threat. So you probably should capture on d3. It's what happened. I think I want to capture with the pawn first. But here we see these trades. The black queen will land on d3 and then queen e2. Getting into a queenless middle game. So 2 rooks, 2 minor pieces per side. This square is under black's control. This pawn is really good because it limits and restricts black's pieces, but it is a pawn that can be vulnerable later in the game. So we're in a pure endgame here. I'm just going to... I think we're going to move on for the moment. We'll be switching between the games. Let's pull up the game between Gunina and Kayuning, because in this game, there's just more life. The queen's on the board still, so it gives more chances for both sides, I would say. And bring Gunina on camera here, very focused. And let me flip it so we see it from the white side. So these pawns here are great. Knight a5, oh, that's a fork of your pieces. Have to keep your bishop protected, so move your queen to b6. Knight takes c6, rook takes c6. We see some trades. Rook b1, though. It's pawn on b5. Starting to feel like this pawn on a6... I said pawn a6. Pawn a4 should be back on a6 was my point. Because from a6, the pawn is safe and sound. So here, a3. And I'm wondering at what moment black should consider a pawn sacrifice. I keep mentioning this idea of pawn quality more so than pawn quantity. So if I can break free an outside pass pawn, that sounds good. Queen c3 is tempting, but I know that I'm giving up my b5 pawn. So I don't want to give up my b5 pawn. So with that in mind, I'm still thinking about b4. I actually really like the idea of b4. I don't know if it pans out just yet, but b4 to spring free my a4 pawn. It looks... It's easy for me to say, it's much harder to do. That's how I would sum that up. I do think that b4 was possible, but if you're not certain that the pass pawn will either remain an asset, or if it's not enough compensation, even if it is an asset, then you don't play the move. Because it can be attacked if it's on the... if you give this pawn on b4, take with my pawn, I can eventually play rook a1 and go after the pawn. So knight a6 is a much calmer, probably a smarter choice, all things considered. Keeping everything safe and sound. There's no structural risk in black's position. e5 is very committal. It gives up the d5 square, but it also gives you the e4 square for your queen. I wouldn't do that. I don't want to allow this knight forward. This pawn here restricts the knight from getting active. And why would I allow your knight to d5 where maybe you can even go to c3? So queen f4. Don't forget that your rook is hanging on b8. And well, where do you move that rook? Because if you move to the side, you lose this pawn on b5. And if you move up, something about moving this rook up. So rook to b4 just to stop b4, queen to e5. Can I just apply the pressure? Rook c1, great move. You're putting your rook on the open file, but I'm still worried about b4. Like, that worry is never going to leave my head until it's played, in which case I don't have to worry about it anymore. I think that's black's next move, is pawn to b4. It looks like the move. So, what to do here? What to do? I'm starting to like maybe d5. It's a kind of thematic pawn sacrifice. d5 takes e5, but I guess black will return the pawn with knight to e4. You can play knight to e8, but that's how you get yourself in trouble with bishop f5, rook c8. All of a sudden your king doesn't feel very good. So she plays queen e5 instead, and then b4 played super quickly. And just rook takes b4. White will play d5. So this is a tactic you have to be careful about. So here, d5 takes, knight takes. Oh, thanks for the pawn. Oh, thanks for your knight. Because this is a back rank checkmate. My rook checks you. My bishop covers the escape square. You have to block with your queen, and I take it. So rook takes d5, a3. And okay. Rook c7. It's starting to look scary, but this pawn is also looking pretty good. But this rook is super active. The queen on e5 is perfectly placed, covering the a1 square. It's a really tense position right now. Actually, what is black? I think queen e8. I need to protect e6. So all right, queen e8 played. Just keeping this protected. That's a smart decision. And so 30 extra seconds. Well, 20 now. It was a 25 when I said it. But 20 extra seconds for white. Black has the passed a pawn. White is looking to maybe create a pass pawn of her own. d6 comes to mind. But a2, rook b1 check. This is not an easy position. So no wonder Gunina is spending a lot of time. She plays d6. But what about a2? Played. Rook b1 check is a devastating threat. So king h2, so there's no check. Wait. Why not rook a4? Put the rook behind your pass pawn. Because now the white rook simultaneously attacks the pawn and has threats towards the black king. Queen d8. Oh, what a shot! What? I didn't even see that coming. Oh my gosh, what a shot there. Oh, that was nasty. Oh my gosh. I was like, well, what's this doing? But I guess with rook to b1, Kai Ning was like, wait a sec, I'm going to put my queen here. She's going to fall for knight g4 check. And then there's this mate if you capture back. Oh my gosh, they caught me so off guard there. And now black just up a queen. So let's go to the other game because it looks like she's going to take this full point. Seems pretty evident. Let's go to the other game here. Oh my gosh. Now, that really was crazy. So let's look at Anna Ushenina here. She has the black pieces. Wait a sec. I see mate in 2. Checkmate. That's step 1. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Padmini gets checkmated with the king on g4. Whew. And it looks like Gunina still is going to try to fight it out. We'll wait until the next game or when there's maybe an interesting moment. I'll keep my eye on it, but for now, we should stay on this match here between Anna Ushanina and Padmini route, because now Padmini needs to win with the black pieces. And a5, okay. Oh wait, why do I have this from the black? Let me flip the board. Sorry about that, everybody. So the b5, you can eventually play c4, and by playing a4, like, you may want to think about a3, but this pawn is very advanced. You do take away the option from white to play a4 and protect b5, but okay, bishop a3, that's a good move. You don't really want to allow pawn a3. The bishop is better on a3 than was on b2. It actually attacks something. So I'm thinking rook c1, pawn c4, things of this nature. We saw in the first match, Anna Ushanina, she just played very solidly when she had the white pieces and a 1-0 lead. So it seems like she's doing the same here, trading some stuff off. Bishop b2. Queen d6 is what I'd play, just to at least pretend like I'm throwing knight to g4. It's pretend because there's a knight on f3 covering. Okay. So c4, good move. No, this looks pretty level so far. Wow, I still can't believe that this first game ended in checkmate, and for the other game that Caillou Ning with a knight g4 check. That is the move of the event thus far, as far as I can remember. Just the idea of the event. Putting the queen on d8, like, what are you doing? Are you giving me your a2 pawn? And she tricked her. She certainly tricked her. So let's go to the other match. I'm going to switch the player cam here. Let's put on, you can see the if Caillou Ning just here. See her setup. She's playing, she's focused only on the chess, and well, you know exactly what she's looking at. Her screen is visible to you. She is just playing the chess. So in this position, white has double pawns. So she has these double pawns, but she wants to play e4. We've seen these type of ideas earlier, and it was a Goryachkina game where Goryachkina was black. Wasn't against Caillou Ning, just in the quarterfinal stage? It was. So she likes these positions, and how can you blame her? In general, black does not want to open up the files and the diagonals for a piece like a bishop on g2. So you want to play pawn to d4. But if you play pawn d4 here, I just take it, play knight c3, play rook d1. Black will start with bishop c5, and there will be, some ideas for counterplay, but nothing more than that. Rook c8, knight c3. We saw this exact position, and well, d takes e4, bishop e4. You have to take with here because both pieces are under attack. Queen takes e4, and only white can be better here. Slightly better, but better nonetheless. And Gunina is really eating up some time here. Some serious clock. And d4 takes... She spent 40 seconds on d4. It's a move she probably knew about and wanted to play. Then she concerned herself with, is it the right time? Should I take on e4 instead? I need to win the game. Can't just make a draw. But now white is up a pawn and has control of the d file. So take this, I think. Then rook to d7. Possible. You take my rook, I take your queen. You take this way, I would take here, here. We have a queen against two rooks. Typically better for the two rooks, but perhaps there's some kind of timely queen a4, or just even playing casually may be enough to be okay. So rook d8. I'm thinking about some kind of queen d2. put a third piece on the D file. And what do you do after queen d2? You can't take on e5. Because I take. You take. I take. You take. I say, here's my queen. Have it. Enjoy it while it lasts because it only is lasting one more move. That's checkmate. h4. Good decision. Gaining space so that the king cannot get off the back rank. Also taking away black's move g5. Black may want to play g5 to kick the bishop off at f4, where it's protecting the e5 pawn. So taking on e5. I'm anticipating rook takes, rook takes, rook takes. Bishop takes is forced because the queen needs to stay protecting this. Takes the bishop. I think queen a4. There are so many tactics. Queen a4 here. Or does not work. Take. I want to take here because if it takes, I had this move again. This is needing the rook's protection. And here, but I can take there and then you take here. You want to take here, you take back, and now my rook protects the bishop. Black is up in exchange. So it doesn't work out. Lots of trades. Doesn't work out. So bishop c6 was possible. Instead, bishop f6 played. Can I go knight here and go after this pawn? Knight b5 played. Good move. Good move indeed. You know what would not have been a good move is queen takes a7. And this is very bad because rook a8 traps the queen over here. So that's a way to get greedy but end up with a material deficit. Knight b5 played. And the threat was also knight to d6 in addition to a7. This knight is now pinned to the queen. Rook d6. Hitting the queen. Queen moved up. I'm thinking b4. Keep attacking this queen. Doesn't have many squares. I guess after b4, there's queen c4. And there's pressure on e4. The bishop on f4 is really good. Oop. She moved it back. It was really good there, but still really good because it protects the c1 square from the enemy queen. Okay, so trading queens feels pretty good. But then if I trade queens, this rook and bishop are staring at e4. Oh, I guess I could take with a knight. What am I even talking about? Queen c4, knight c4. And I attack d6, I attack b2. So maybe don't take. Maybe queen takes a7 then? Looks a bit risky, but you don't want to play too solidly. People think that when you only need a draw, you just play for a draw. But what does that mean? Playing for a draw. You play something without too much risk, sure. But then if you're just playing for that result, and you're like, oh, let me trade queens, let me do this, let me avoid any kind of kingside attack because I'm just trying to make a draw, that's actually how you often lose games. Let's see. The other game, just to pull that one up really quickly, it looks like Anna Ushina still in a good spot with white. But watch out for a time the queen takes b3. Not happening. This one, the queen on e2 is too good. But the point is that if I can take here and play a2, I could get a queen. If not for queen takes here. And you also may ask, what's the benefit of doing that? Well, if the bishop were back here, now their idea is the queen takes b3. But it seems like white is just first. His pawn's already on d7. In comes queen f3, attacking this bishop. Behind that bishop is his pawn. And that pawn's in trouble. So let's go back to the other game. I'll keep an eye on that game we just came from, the Ushanina route game, because, well, Pamina needs to win, and it doesn't look like she's winning. Knight c4. Gunina, on the other hand, has good chances here. I think she has good chances. Knight takes b2. I think you have to take. Take. Then what? Knight takes, rook a8. I guess you can bring your knight back to b5, but it looks not great. So this did happen. Rook c1. So why trade the rooks? It feels pretty hard to win this game without the rooks. Especially after e5. The bishop's getting traded now. Only way to avoid the trade is bishop a6. And then bishop f1. So with the bishops coming off, I don't think white has any danger of losing this game. And I think we will see Kai Yu-Ning move on to the Women's Speeches Championship. This is a qualifier. The top 2 players qualify. They're in 2 separate matches. And so if she draws this game, it's the equivalent of a win because she's already at 1-0. So it's will be the final game of the match. Now white might win this game. Ooh, nice move. Nice move. Oh my gosh, we tuned in late, but apparently Gunina missed a free knight? Wait, I didn't even tune in late. I just wasn't... Oh my gosh. How? That's sad. It's sad missing that, because now when we got into this position, knight c8 was really nice because you're threatening both the pawn and the check. And now you stole a pawn. Now you have an outside pass pawn and an extra pawn. So you're up 1 pawn and it's an outside pass pawn. Wow. Okay, knight c4. Maybe there's king d5. So you have to be a little bit careful here. Just show some precision. Knight a4. That way the knight can come to c3. And then the knight can go d1. She only needs a draw. And it looks like Uchenna wins the second game, by the way. That king got mated. Sure, there was a fun finish that we should look at. Afterwards, what's going on here? Oh, this is going to be a thematic potential king and pawn game. G5, F6 type of scenario. So knight e4. Okay, pushing the pawn. Knight e4 still works. That's what Chelsea Monica did earlier. Oh, whoa! Whoa! No, she has 5 seconds left. She blundered. And the h-pawn doesn't win. The h-pawn does not win. Wrong corner. So this is actually important here. With this bishop, if you can get rid of this pawn and this pawn, she's not doing it. She needs to play g5 and hope that... No, this is it. Well done. Well done indeed. Wait. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Here comes g5. Oh no, she blundered! She blundered back! Oh no, she had the draw! This is what happens when you're playing bullet. She had the draw. And now it's winning for black. Pre-move bishop g5. So the best thing to do is put your bishop here and then just take this pawn. But you can't take this pawn yet because then the white king comes back to the corner. So this is exactly the tech. Oh, you gotta go king f3 there. You have to go king f3 when the king was on f5. So you keep pushing the king away. Have we already reached a position? Oh my gosh. Is it no longer winning? Or was it never winning? No, it had to be winning. It had to be. And the thing is, if this king goes for the pawn, which we all can see can happen, I don't like the king going at this. No. Put the king on f3. When the king gets f5, oh my gosh, no time. 1.5 seconds. Oh my gosh. King f3, there it is, finally, the king got to f3. Wait, is there going to be repetition in bishop g5? Don't go bishop g5. Oh, she lost in time. She lost in time. Oh no. And you see the... Oh, how cheery Kai Yu-Ning is there. That was unbelievable. Okay, there is so much to look at. I'm going to... We saw the celebration. I'll take her off camera. I don't want her to have to monitor what she's doing. So we see the two players move on, Ana Ushen and Kayu Ning. Let's go back in this game because firstly, we'll talk about, unfortunately, there was a knight hanging and that was missed. And you don't expect your opponent to blunder a knight, so I can understand missing that. Queen traded on d1. And from here, it's like, all right, we're in an endgame. What's going to happen? So black, to her credit, Gunina tried her best. She went for a bishop trade on d5, trying to get a passed pawn. And look at this move. A brilliant move. Hitting this pawn on b6. And otherwise, if you move the pawn, I have knight e7 check, picking up the pawn d5. So that was overlooked by Gunina, but quickly spotted by Kayu Ning. And so we have the capture. The king came towards the center, and now it's just good for white. But things start going south around here. This pawn is very advanced. f5, e6, and playing e7 was probably too soon. Start with knight e4. So after knight e4, you'll be able to take this pawn on d2, and then rush this king in Chelsea-Monaco style. Because the bishop can't simultaneously protect this pawn and stop the pass pawn and stop this other pass pawn. So that was a missed opportunity. In fact, this pawn just pushes. So there are plenty of winning opportunities here for white. e7 was a mistake. Bishop c5, knight e4, and then we saw the capture here. So bishop d8 was good. And as we continue this way, the king came in, and this was a mistake. If she played king to g5, excuse me, king to b4, king g6, bishop f6, that's it. It's winning, because g5, if I take with the bishop, now it's a draw, because I get my king back here. But if I take with the pawn, h6, I'll take you on h6, have fun with my bishop, because I'm getting a queen. So, wow, that was another missed opportunity, and then it went on from there. It got all crazy where bishop f6, here, bishop here was played. And the problem was after bishop d4, she put a7. A7 is the only move that, well, not the only move, but it doesn't draw. You should play g5 first, just trying to trade off the pawns. And if it takes, you're eventually going to play h6 and just either leave black with the h-pawn or more likely sacrifice your a-pawn to win the last pawn. So a really instructive moment here to play g5 first. And after this, once again, it's closing in on winning territory because the bishop cuts off the king's attack. And all right, well, that's it. Ana Ushen, Kayu Ning qualified. We will have the next Women's Speed Chess Championship qualifier tomorrow. And so I'll see you later. I'm going to do Pog Champs. We're rating. So have a good one, everybody. I'm out of here.